All right, it's 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 19th of May 2026. So we are commencing our future Melbourne Committee meeting. I declare this meeting open and I welcome councillors, management and members of the public attending tonight's meeting, both in person and virtually. I note that Councillor Kevin Louie is joining the meeting remotely via Zoom. Good to see you on the big screen, Councillor Louie. We are meeting on the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respects to their elders, past and present. This meeting is being streamed live, and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the Council's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. Moving on to agenda item 2, if any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest in relation to a matter to be considered by committee, please disclose it at the time the item is being considered. We move on to agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. There are no minutes for confirmation at this meeting. The minutes from the FMC meeting held on Tuesday the 5th of May and the special future Melbourne Committee meeting on Tuesday the 12th of May will be confirmed at the next scheduled future Melbourne Committee meeting on the 2nd of June 2026. Agenda item 4, submissions and correspondence. The following submissions have been received in accordance with the Council's governance rules. In relation to agenda item 6.1, Lonsdale Street and King Street planning application, there's been a request to speak and items of correspondence from Zoran Trimsevsky from Hickory, James Pearce from FK, also known as Fender Katsalides. We have an item of correspondence from Mia Zar at Tract as well. In relation to agenda item 6.2, 380 to 388 Russell Street, Melbourne, we have a request to speak from Luke Mooney from Planning and Property Partners, and items of correspondence from Jim Stewart and Ian Young. In relation to agenda item 6.3, Hawke Street Greening Project, we have a request to speak and correspondence from Max Binks, Aaron Moon and Carl Hessian. We have items of correspondence from a Hawke Street resident and from Sybil Gibb. Now, can I check, is there anybody amongst us this evening who would like to speak to any of the items on the agenda and for whom I have not just read out their name? Good. So we go on. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item, and just a gentle reminder, you will have 3 minutes to speak at that time. We move to agenda item 5, public questions. A 15-minute period will be provided at the beginning and end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration. I remind members of the public that this is not the time to make submissions. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item. As at 10 a.m. today, there have been 2 written public questions received. One will be asked in person. I note that in reading these questions, the reader is not attesting to the veracity and factual nature of the statements made. I will now invite Chris Thrum to ask a question. Good to see you at Town Hall. Chris, thank you for your long-standing interest in all matters here at the City of Melbourne.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Lord Mayor, councillors, and viewers at home. Start off well in Wurundjeri country, respect to elders past and present. Thank you for the preamble from the Lord Mayor about that. It's Radio Festival time at 3 PBS FM, 106.7 FM, and the theme that they've got going for this year's festival is Fuel the Frequency. Melbourne's the music capital of Australia. We've got some of the best radio stations on planet Earth, and some of the best radio shows are on 3 PBS. We love 3 PBS. Now, 3 PBS provides the most unique and underrepresented music all day, every day. It's an eclectic bag and brew of music. It's always worth listening to. The on-air celebrations runs from 18th of May until the 31st of May. So the question is, could the City of Melbourne consider, the Lord Mayor, councillors and management team and staff consider subscribing to 3 PBS like I will be, or resubscribing, and making sure that we fuel the frequency and keep the great music going on radio station 3 PBS.
Thank you very much, Chris. We will go to our arts czar on this one, Councillor Philip Leilu.
Ni hao ma.
Thanks, Chris, for that. And more than happy to. I think it's at a discretion of everyone to do it themselves, but not a problem. I've already set it in my car to listen to it, so more than happy to subscribe and fuel the frequency.
Sure, do sure.
My one tea.
Thank you, Chris Thrum. Thank you, Councillor Philip Leilu. I now call on the Deputy Lord Mayor, Roshena Campbell, to read out a written question as Planning Portfolio Lead.
Thank you. This question is from Jacqueline McGowan Grace. I'm just going to check Jacqueline's not here to ask the question herself. No, I will then read the question. To the Lord Mayor, Chief Executive Officer and Planning Department, could you please explain why, despite repeated requests beginning more than a month ago, responsible council officers have not provided a copy of the Lend-Lease Construction Management Plan for Garawa Place? The Construction Management Plan is a foundational document of clear public significance. In compliance with Council's activities, Local Law 2024, a construction management plan directly affects the health, safety, access and amenity of nearby residents, traders and visitors, and its continued delay raises legitimate concerns about Council's commitment to transparency, accountability and community access to information relating to the project. Could you please clarify, 1, why the document has not been provided in response to previous requests? 2, which department or entity currently holds responsibility for the document? 3, what steps are now being taken to make it publicly available, including the expected timeframe for release? Given the importance of Queen Victoria Market Precinct and the scale of the surrounding development works, will you ensure that the plan and construction traffic impact assessment will be released without further delay? First of all, thank you so much for your question, Jacqueline. I understand that our officers have actually been directly in touch with you to provide a comprehensive response, but for the purposes of those here tonight and you, if you're listening along at home, the answer in summary was construction management plans are prepared by developers and builders to manage construction activity. They are not a council-authored document. Council requires the permission from the CMP owner to provide a copy to anyone requesting it. In this instance, the CMP owner has not provided consent. However, they have offered to meet with anyone, including you, who has questions about the management of construction at Garawa Place, and if you'd like to take that offer up, I'm sure our officers will be happy to assist you in facilitating that. Council officers have indicated that if there are any concerned parties, they are very happy to assist in facilitating that type of meeting. Alternatively, you could make an application under Freedom of Information, which would then be considered through the FOI process. Importantly, Council does understand your concerns and those of stakeholders and residents about the importance of managing potential impacts, particularly of large construction projects, and we thank you for your interest in this. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to consider the more substantive advice from officers, and feel free to be in touch if this raises any further issues.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Are there any other questions from people present this evening? As I said, we've set aside 15 minutes for public questions. Aaron Moon. Please make your way to the lectern.
Just a quick question. As I was waiting for the meeting to start, beautiful native garden out the front of Town Hall, and I was just wondering, do these plants count towards the 3,000 trees planted at the City of Melbourne, or are they additional? Do they get counted in that way?
Thank you for your question, and thanks for your eyes of appreciation for our native plantings there. I might go to Councillor Griffiths as our Environment Lead to respond.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thanks, Aaron, for the question. And officers may want to add to this, but I'm not going to miss the opportunity to also talk about the beautiful little native garden that we have out the front, which of course contains Melbourne's new floral emblem, Swampy, the swamp everlasting. It's fantastic to see it there, and it was also fantastic to see it being planted at the East Melbourne Library when I was over there recently. My understanding is that these plants don't contribute to the overall count that is for trees, because obviously making sure that we hit those 3,000 trees a year is a really important target and one that we want to make sure that we're fulfilling properly. But I'm not sure if either the acting CEO or other officers wish to add to that.
No, I'm getting thumbs up that you've completely covered it. So thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Thank you. Aaron, are there any other questions from members of the public? Do you have another question, Aaron?
Just to follow up, what happens to the plants after they've been used for this display? Because I know there's a rotation out the front.
Councillor Griffiths?
Again, officers might want to add to this answer, and I think it depends a bit on the state that the plants are in by the time they're coming out of the planter boxes. But I know that particularly with some of the vegetable and fruit displays that we've had out there, that they've either been given to local markets or in some cases planted out. For instance, at the East Melbourne Library community garden at the back of that. So there's something to see at the front and the back of the East Melbourne Library next time you're up there.
There we go, getting thumbs up again. Thank you, and thank you for your questions, Aaron. Are there any other questions from members of the public? No, in that case, we will move on and move into general business. There are two reports from management which are to be considered under the Planning Act. So I will hand over to the Deputy Lord Mayor and Planning Lead.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. You are correct. There are indeed two reports from management in this section. The first is agenda item 6.1, Ministerial Planning Referral, TPMR 2019-34/B, 572 to 574 Lonsdale Street, Melbourne, and 248 to 260 King Street, Melbourne. I am going to request a presentation on this item. So I'm going to ask Nick McLennan, the Acting Head of Statutory Planning, to please make a brief presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillors. The application before you this evening is a ministerial referral to amend an existing permit for a proposed 48-storey mixed-use tower comprising dwellings and retail space. Next slide, please. The site is located on a prominent CBD corner, being Lonsdale and King Streets within the Hoddle grid. The area is undergoing significant change with intensification and activation occurring on and around the site, characterised by commercial, residential and entertainment uses. Next slide, please. The site itself is surrounded by high-density built form and was home to the former Kilkenny Inn. The site was subject to a fire in 2022, which necessitated the demolition of a substantial portion of the building. However, importantly, the heritage facade was retained and is incorporated into the proposed development. That demolition that occurred was no greater than what was approved in the initial approval. Next slide, please. Here we have an approved versus proposed renders of the proposal. On the left is the approved 21-storey office building, which was approximately 80 metres in height. And on the right is the application before us this evening, which is a 48-storey residential tower sitting at approximately 151 metres. Next slide, please. The proposed design response at ground floor includes active retail uses fronting Lonsdale and King Street. Coupled with the residential entry along Lonsdale Street, this assists with improving street activation within the area. On your right-hand side, the pedestrian link to Mountain Lane from Lonsdale Street enhances the permeability, and the proposed layout helps to strengthen the public realm and connectivity through the site. Next slide, please. The podium positively responds to the retained portion of the Kilkenny Inn. The reduced and transition street wall improves the heritage interface from that originally approved and helps to maintain a human scale and fine-grained character on this important corner of the city. Next slide, please. The corner elevation as viewed from King and Lonsdale Streets highlights the tower set back above the heritage fabric, which protects the prominence of the Kilkenny Inn facade. High-quality facade materials and refined articulation provide depth and visual interest, ensuring the tower reads as a well-resolved contemporary addition that complements the retained heritage fabric. The new tower floor plate will accommodate 469 apartments. Importantly, the development seeks a floor area uplift, which is supported through the inclusion of an on-site delivery of 5% of the floor area of affordable housing contribution on the site, equating to approximately 23 apartments, which is strongly supported by management. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Nick. This is obviously a very significant change in the permit. I think it was 21 stories originally. What is management's view about this proposed built form compared to what was originally in the permit?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And as outlined in the management report, officers are quite comfortable with this proposal in its current form. We believe the site has been, and the form itself has been massaged and probably more appropriately structured on the site, which is resulting in a well-articulated development that we're quite comfortable in supporting.
Thank you. I've got a question from the Lord Mayor.
Thanks, DLM. Nick, in terms of the mix of units in this development between studio, 1-bed, 2-bed, 3-bed, could you give us your reflections on those numbers and anything you want to add around that?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And through you, Deputy Lord Mayor, the proposal comprises 129 studios, 208 one-bedrooms, 122 bedrooms and 12 three-bedroom apartments. Officers are comfortable with that mix. We think it's a good offering given the current housing crisis that we're in, and we're supportive of that.
And then my second question, if that's okay, DLM, just goes to the facade and the facade strategy. So obviously the Kilkenny Inn is a well-known corner in Melbourne, and great to see quite a lot of brick incorporated, certainly in the ground plane on the building. How far does the brick extend up the facade? It was hard to tell from the drawings. And again, any thoughts about that? Welcome.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Without stealing the thunder from the architects who's here to speak tonight, I might pass that one on to them to discuss. They might have some better renders. Sorry, I think that render's probably not too clear. But if they don't, I'm happy to take it on note and come back with an answer for you.
We can come back. Yeah. Thanks. Back to you, DLM.
Thanks, LM. Thank you, Nick. Are there any other questions? No? Oh, yes, Councillor Camillo.
I just want to double check with council. Are you okay with only 12 three-bedroom apartments in the mix? What, like, we need more families bring to the city of Melbourne? Like, sounds disproportional for the other sizes. Studios, 2-bedroom, and just 12 three-bedrooms.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, we would welcome more 3-bedroom apartments. However, in terms of the policy before us that we are assessing the application on, there's nothing that compels more to be provided, so we're comfortable in this instance.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Thank you so much, Nick. Sorry, did you have a question? No, I've let it go. Thanks, though, Bill. I now call on Zoran Trumchevsky from Hickory, who's requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Thank you so much, Zoran. I just remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll start by thanking you all for your time this evening, Lord Mayor and councillors. By way of background, Hickory acquired this site back in 2019. There was a period of 2 years where we went about redesigning the site, and we were successful in obtaining a commercial permit in 2021. Unfortunately, due to the headwinds that we're all aware of and persistent market conditions, it's meant that we've had to redesign what we thought we'd deliver on this site, and it's taken the best part of 3 years to get what we've actually looked at and we're looking at this evening. It's been a carefully considered approach, we think, by us and our key consultants, including Tract and FK in terms of architects. The site itself, we're looking to obviously bring much needed housing to the CBD, including, which was just touched on, the 5% affordable, which is circa 23 apartments. We have welcomed the collaborative nature of discussions with DTP and obviously council, and now just obviously seek the support of the committee in terms of our current application to not just reactivate this site, but also reimagine the Western Precinct there that's probably a little bit tired and underdone. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoran. I'm just going to see if there are any questions from councillors. I was wondering if Councillor Camillo wanted to ask his question.
I could provide your view in relation to big. We have the need for big apartments for family to have a big mix in the city, and we see too much 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, but not 3. Is there anything you can give some feedback in that respect? Please?
Certainly. As head of property and development at Hickory, I've got extensive experience and I see firsthand what is transacting in the build-to-sell market in the CBD and also what is being occupied in a BTR build-to-rent market. I can tell you firsthand that we're in all our developments in the CBD, and we have a Spire just around the corner from this site that was delivered during COVID, and we've recently delivered a new building in December 2025 in Queensbridge behind Crown. The only apartment stock we're left with are 3 bedrooms. Okay. They're difficult to sell, difficult to occupy, and it's probably where everyone's, if you're a developer, that's where your profit sits, but also for us, it's that stock that just sits there regardless of price and rental. We don't have that uptick yet. One of the things we definitely looked at with our architects was whether we could change the mix and pivot depending on take-up. So one of the things we've looked at are potential for dual key options, where 3s can be converted to 2s and 1s and vice versa. So it's really those 3-bedroom apartments, although large and would bring families to the CBD, we're not seeing that firsthand over the last, call it 2 to 3 years, if not longer than that. And that's clear with all the apartments that we've got currently in this CBD, especially down that end of town.
Okay, just a feedback. I'm hearing a lot that people would like to buy 3 bedrooms if the entire build could be 3 bedrooms and mix the family, has areas for kids and stuff. Just leave with that for maybe a future project.
Yep, understand. Take that on board. Appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor
Leilu.
I'm sure Councillor Camillo, if you've got any potential future buyers, you can send them that way, right? It's to always. I'm sure they'll be more than welcome. Can I just ask one of the questions, given the federal budget about removing negative gearing and investment and everything, and I guess you guys pivoting towards from office space into residential, this would be something that could be considered part of investment and also could be negatively geared in the future as well, right? It's something that
correct
at the back of your mind.
Yeah,
you can
correct.
Speak a little bit
New
more
build ticks the box in terms of that negative gearing component.
Yep.
I guess when I look at this project too, I don't necessarily look at it as just a build to sell opportunity. We internally at Hickory refer to it as a residential development. And the reason for that is it has to actually tailor to and change depending on what the market requires and more importantly, the CBD. So for example, at that end of town, we're halfway through a construction project for student accommodation. Now this is earmarked for build to sell, but it might be that it ends up being build to rent. But in any event, it's residential and bringing homes to market for Melburnians in the CBD, including families and young families and people of different age groups.
Sure. In terms of affordable housing, have you already picked someone that will be managing, or are you going to be something that you're going to be doing yourself?
We haven't nominated yet. We've got a long partnership with existing partnership with the likes of Evolve, St George and others that we've partnered with on other projects. Okay. We're just simply looking at getting the permit first and then working out who's best placed to provide that housing in that area, as opposed to we've had Evolve at Fitzroy Gasworks. We've had St George out at Box Hill.
Yep.
So it just really depends on the provider and who's best placed in the CBD to bring to life what we're hoping to develop and build.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just checking there are no other questions. No? Thank you very much, Zoran. I now call on James Pearce from Vendor Katsoulides, who's requested the opportunity to address the committee. James, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors. My name is James Pearce. I'm a partner at Vendor Katsoulides. We're the architects for the Lonsdale Street proposal that you saw for you. I unfortunately don't have a presentation with me, but it was flashed up there, so happy to ask or answer questions regarding that. But thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of the proposal, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to really sincerely thank the council officers for their enthusiastic engagement through the planning process. As Zoran said, the site represents a significant opportunity to really revitalise this part of the city. The site has been empty for a number of years now, and we'd really like to change that. Today we're seeking approval for an amendment as being discussed to an existing proposal, and it proposes a redesigned development transitioning from a commercial office tower to a residential apartment building. Importantly, this is a considered evolution, one that responds to changing market conditions, contemporary housing needs, and retaining key public realm and heritage outcomes. So, as has been discussed, we're proposing 469 homes, and crucially, the scheme retains and builds on key ground plane and public benefit elements of the previously approved design. This includes the retention and restoration of the heritage Kilkenny fabric, the continuation and enhancement of the publicly accessible pedestrian link between Manton Lane and Lonsdale Street, and a built form that responds appropriately to its CBD context, an elegantly proportioned tower, engaging with a podium responding to the scale of the street and the materials, proportions and detailing of the existing heritage building. The proposal provides affordable housing, as we said, 5%, which is around about 23 or 25, depending on how you calculate it, apartments, will be dedicated affordable houses. It delivers the 469 new homes in a highly accessible and serviced location, making a meaningful contribution to housing supply in central Melbourne. Ultimately, the amendment represents a logical and well-founded response to changing economic conditions and evolving planning priorities. It retains the strengths of the previously approved scheme, enhances public benefit and delivers much-needed housing. We respectfully seek your support for the amendment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, James. I'm just seeing if there are any questions. Yes, I believe the Lord Mayor has one.
Thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, James. I'll start with Manton Lane. So just looking through the drawings, I wanted to get clarification. Will that remain an open to the sky laneway?
No, it's but what it's doing is taking a very, very narrow little pass through from Lonsdale Street into Manton Lane into a much wider 7 metres or so space, double height, so that you can clearly see that there's an image of it there, accessibility through to Manton Lane. At the moment, it's really a bit spooky walking down there, and it won't be. Importantly, also, it's sided with active retail uses to the left and right, so that people feel welcomed, and I think it'll just greatly improve Manton Lane down there.
Yep. And so, in terms of the height, it will be double height. Did you say?
Yes, that's right.
So is that to a height of 2 stories?
Two stories. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, in terms of it remaining publicly accessible, is that 24/7?
Yes, absolutely. It's not gated or anything like that, so it's publicly accessible. Yeah.
Okay. And then my second question just goes to materials. So that render of Manton Lane with looks like brick there. Can I confirm that what looks like brick there is brick?
That's absolutely correct, yes. You can see the wonders of modern construction enable us to put bricks on the ceiling, which is great.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay, if we could then go to the next drawing. So there we see several stories of facades. So how much of that is brick?
So the lower portion at the height of the Kilkenny, which, taking its cue from the brick in the Kilkenny, runs across as brick. Above that, it's a brick colour or that warm or tone, but that's more in a GRC or precast concrete.
Right.
finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've seen that. We've seen that at Melbourne Place, for example.
Yeah.
Kennedy Nolan design, but it looks quite good actually.
Exactly.
But is that what you're
It's exactly right. It's that warm colour. It's that integral colour. So it has a slightly, variation through it. So it reads as a natural material, but it's low maintenance and it's robust and constructible. Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much, James.
Thank you.
And I just might ask a question leading on from that, James. So that material only covers the podium type level, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And then what is the facade strategy for the
So the
Balfour
facade
Tower?
for the tower is it's really a scaling device. There you can see it's a gridded form over 3 stories, so it brings the scale of the building down a bit. Although the building is adjacent to some very tall existing buildings, so it's the building itself is an appropriate response to the area. That gives it a texture over the building. At the lower portions, there are balconies visible. Above that, the balconies are inboard for wind conditions, but the material then would either be a metal panel or a GRC, depending on constructability at the time, to form that grid. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And obviously teamed with a very high performance glass to get all of the environmental conditions that we need within the apartments. Yeah.
Terrific, thank you. Were there any other questions from councillors? No? Thank you so much, James. In that case, could I ask for a motion to be put up on the screen? Thank you. I will move that motion and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Leilu. And I will now speak to this motion. Can I begin by thanking our submitters, particularly those who were present here tonight, as well as those in writing. I think we've received a submission from Tract that was a written submission. Can I begin by saying this is a ministerial planning referral? And so while the minister will be the ultimate decision maker, there is no doubt that this is an incredibly important site in our city. In fact, a landmark, heritage corner site. Better known to those in the room probably as the Kilkenny Inn, but formerly known as 572 to 574 Lonsdale Street and 248 to 260 King Street. The original permit was for a 21-storey office and retail building with a floor area ratio of 18:1. The proposal before us tonight is for a 48-storey residential tower with 469 dwellings, a mix of apartment types, as you've heard, as well as ground floor retail. So a significant change, both in use and in scale. The applicant is Hickory, the architect is Fender Katsoulides, and the estimated cost of the development is $350 million. And it is worth remarking on the fact that a development of this scale is a real vote of confidence in the future of the CBD, and in particular the future of residential in the CBD, and we certainly welcome that. The site is located within the capital city zone and it's affected by heritage overlays, DDO 1 and DDO 10. Importantly, for a site of this scale and this uplift, it's worth discussing the public benefit being offered by the applicant. The original permit was very much focused on a public benefit from office. This really does shift that to a 5% affordable housing calculated by net saleable area delivered on site, as well as those public realm improvements, including the extension of Manton Lane with, as you've seen, that increased width of the site, quite in considerable increased width, which does provide connectivity and permeability, and importantly is going to be accessible to the public 24/7. The 5% affordable housing contribution equates to approximately 1,400 square metres of net saleable area. That's around 23 dwellings, 6 studios, 10 one-bedrooms, 6 two-bedrooms and 1 three-bedroom dwelling. We do not often see an affordable housing contribution of this scale, certainly not one delivered on site, and that is very welcome. It is worth, though, speaking to some of the conditions recommended by our officers, which I certainly support, given the scale of this development and the impact it is going to have on the CBD at such a prominent corner site. The first is the facade strategy, and it's appropriate that be given very strong emphasis. In particular, there is a clause requiring high quality tower expression. A tower of this scale, it is important that this is a positive addition to the CBD, and the building needs to go beyond basic compliance to actually deliver a distinctive architectural identity, something that all Melburnians, as you walk past, as you look up, that you feel it is a addition to our city you can be proud of. That's why we are looking for refined facade articulation, thoughtful integration of contextual design references, and that is so important given the integration of that heritage Kilkenny Inn, and deliberate use of materials and colour variation. The facade, of course, is one of the most visible and enduring elements of this development, one that all Melburnians will feel they have a stake in, as they should, and how it contributes to the character and quality of the city's skyline and streetscape is incredibly important. Having said all of that, in my view, this does present a superior planning outcome to the original proposal and should be supported. Importantly, this proposal will reinstate and activate a long dormant site. It is, quite frankly, unacceptable in a city like Melbourne that a site like this remains vacant, and so we are incredibly excited by the opportunity to see some activity on this site. And also elements of this proposal, including active ground floor uses, revitalised hospitality offerings, to make sure that this development contributes to the street life of our city, the economic activity in our city, as well as providing desperately needed housing. The additional height enables a more coherent, resolved built form outcome. The tower proportions are actually improved and better integrated with the retained heritage fabric. Finally, although there obviously is a significantly increased scale, the potential impacts are mitigated through design refinement and the permit conditions, resulting in acceptable outcomes for surrounding uses. Can I close by thanking the team who have done a lot of work on this very significant proposal, Evan Council, Nick McLennan, and other officers. I am very happy to support this motion, and I commend it to my councillor colleagues. Over to you, Councillor Leilu.
Thank you. I'm happy to echo exactly what you said, but can I first off say thank you to also our team and also to proponents for working together to deliver an outcome, even though what we see today is just, I guess, a presentation and everything, but the amount of hours and effort that would have went behind this would have been quite tremendous, and so it's not an easy task. It'll be difficult to see the temporary park go. I think it's one of the most loved bus stations around. It's probably definitely the best, and people really enjoyed that. But what I think will be replaced will be it will be beautiful. And thank you to, and totally understand the reasoning behind changes from the office space into accommodation. I do note that former Lord Mayor Sally Capp has joined Hickory, so I'm sure it will be very, very good. Sally will be making sure that everything will be on target and looking good. But I know Hickory's been a great, contributor to Melbourne and the great efforts they do. So I'm more than happy to support it. Affordable housing, I think the fact that we've gone we will always like to have more, but the fact that the proponents have proposed that many as well in an especially this particular environment will be very, very welcome. Overall, also happy to support it, and really looking forward to what will become on one of the King Street and Lonsdale Street corner.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No. In that case, I will put it to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That is passed unanimously. In that case, councillors, we now move to agenda item 6.2, TP 2006-274/H, 380 to 388 Russell Street, Melbourne. I will now call on Luke Mooney from Planning and Property Partners, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Luke, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors. To begin with, thank you for the opportunity for presenting to you tonight and talking to the proposal. We're here to talk in support of the officer's recommendation to grant an amended planning permit. It's an application that relates to the Space Hotel, which some of you are probably no doubt aware of on Russell Street. It's an application that's really quite confined in terms of what it does to the building. The hotel use and the ground level restaurant and bar, the proposal doesn't seek to change or modify or alter in any way. It really is confined to existing levels 7 and 8 of the building. And what it proposes is to, I suppose, minor additions at level 7, and then I suppose a more substantive intervention into the building at level 8 to provide for a new function centre use at level 8 of the building. What's before council tonight is, I suppose, a reactivation of a previous permit that was being granted to the site in 2019, I believe it was. It wasn't actually acted on by our client. As you can probably imagine, 2019, the headwinds of COVID and everything else that followed shortly after, it wasn't acted on, and we're now back here with a modified proposal before council tonight. That bears a lot of similarities to that 2019 proposal, but I would suggest it's probably executed the additions to the building in a better form than what they did in 2019. And that's probably primarily a result of the consultation, ongoing engagement with council officers and also council's heritage advisor, which has had inputs to the form, the detailing and the materiality of the addition. And that's happened over quite a significant time in terms of the application before council. The culmination of that was an amended proposal. It's one that's been advertised on 2 occasions, I suppose demonstrating that evolution in terms of the design. In terms of, I suppose, the use, the function centre use as well, it's got a lot of similarities to that 2019 approval in terms of the patron numbers. It does actually pull the hours back slightly from what the 2019 approval was, but importantly, it's probably got a set of further resolved conditions that form part of the officer's recommendation in terms of venue management plans. Noise limiters is an additional requirement through condition of the recommendation. And also it's had regard to the updated EPA noise protocol, which is now in place. So all of those, I suppose, conditions have been informed by some acoustic reporting that was prepared on multiple occasions through the application. And really the conditions forming part of the recommendation give effect to those recommendations and I suppose security and a means of ensuring the amenity of the area can be respected for the function centre use. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. There may be a few questions, but I might kick off. There are 36 objections that have been received in relation to this proposal. Many of them deal with noise and amenity impacts. I think that we are certainly grateful for you addressing on us on some of the improved outcomes, including reduced permitted hours for the rooftop terrace, but I would certainly be grateful, Luke, if you could speak to how this council can have confidence that those noise and amenity impacts will be successfully mitigated.
Sure. Look, I'd probably talk to some of those conditions that form part of the approval. In terms of, to begin with, there's the updated venue management plan, which will really go to the specifics of the operation of the function centre, how it's managed, how it's operated, and obligations on the owner to manage in accordance with our approval that will form part of the permit once endorsed. Again, I'll go to the updated acoustic reports that was prepared and lodged with council. That talks to, again, the updated EPA noise protocol and means, again, of ensuring that report is endorsed and forms part of the permit. Also, the conditions actually give opportunities for council, if necessary, to request noise monitoring and further investigations about, for example, if the issue is raised in terms of non-compliance with the noise protocol or whatever else, there are conditions of the permit that give council the opportunity to request additional reporting of the applicant or the permit operator to demonstrate compliance with their obligations under the protocol. And again, there's some additional conditions that have been introduced through this amendment relating to, as I mentioned before, implementation of noise monitors on various amplified music within the venue.
Thank you. Look, and just to confirm, there is no change to the number of patron numbers from the original permit?
Not from the original permit, that's right.
Thank you. Did any other councillors have questions? No? Okay. Yes, I think that is a yes. Councillor Guest.
Tentative question, noise. It's perhaps a sensitive topic, and it's also sensitive for a different project where I live, and I can see the outcome of something similar up on a high rise where noise was an issue. So I'm really just looking for confidence, if you like, that those in the surrounding area really won't hear noise. I think it says here after midnight outdoor and up to 1 a.m. internally, because speaking from experience, I'd say a recent project hasn't adhered to rules and regulations, and I can hear it from my study. Different place and not in the city, so not exactly the same, but I'm looking for confidence that these noise levels will be adhered to in times.
Well, in terms of, I suppose, the operation, the outdoor rooftop terrace is required to be closed at 11 o'clock, and all activities have to move inside for that new level 8 addition. I suppose there's quite clear parameters in there in terms of how the rooftop will be managed, and that's primarily based on that late night noise, the protocol on how that treats those late night hours differently to the daytime hours. So that's certainly a requirement. Again, I probably sound like a broken record, but I keep coming back to those obligations we have to get approvals from council in terms of management, acoustic reporting that can be requested if needed. And in the same way that plans form part of the approval, those sorts of obligations will as well.
Look, thank you, because actually I think they are a better set of terms and conditions from the project I'm thinking of and questions. So, thanks very much for that. That's good.
Sure.
Thank you. I believe the Lord Mayor had a question too.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. You've covered very well the questions I had around noise and amenity. I was particularly pleased to hear about the acoustic modelling and the ongoing monitoring that will occur. And I guess it goes without saying that here at the City of Melbourne we will be very vigilant on that front. I'll ask a question just around heritage. So it is the IOOF building. It is a significant heritage place. I'm keen to hear a little bit more from you about why this particular design is a more sympathetic heritage response, and has there been any engagement with Heritage Victoria around this particular proposal?
I'll begin with Heritage Victoria. They were a referral authority for the application because of the nearby exhibition building. So there wasn't direct engagement, but they were a referral comment and they've offered no objections or concerns with the proposal. In terms of the treatment, again, there's been 2 or 3 rounds of engagement, amended plans with Council's Heritage Advisor, and primarily the significant elements of the building which sort of was evident through that engagement is it's really the rock wall feature. There's elements of the ground level component which is not changing, and there's that sort of horizontal banding across the building as well. And if you look at the design, I suppose there's a nod to, without reproducing that horizontal banding through the additions that sort of draws upon those elements of the level below. And in terms of above the rock wall feature, there's a Corten screen that's been added to that. And the patterns and the input and the materiality, the colour of that is really, again, sort of a nod to, whilst clearly differentiating it from that rock wall feature on the east elevation of the building.
Thank you. Just checking if there are any other questions. No, thank you very much for that presentation, Luke. I'm going to ask for a motion to be put up on the screen. I'm going to move that motion. I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Laylow. And I will now speak to this motion. As you've heard, the application before us seeks to amend an existing permit for a site at 380 to 388 Russell Street, formerly known as the International Order of Oddfellows, or IOOF, their offices, but now better known to most of you in the room and certainly to me as the Space Hotel. The applicant is Dira Mavora Proprietary Limited. The architect is Mulmurray Architects. The estimated cost of the permitted development is $5.6 million, and the additional cost from the amendment we are considering tonight is about $1 million. The site is located in a mixed-use zone. It's affected by heritage overlays and DD01 and DD04. The application before us tonight seeks to amend and alter the exterior design of alterations and additions to level 7 and 8 of the building, to alter the layout and operation of the authorised function centre use on level 8 of the building, but importantly, it does not seek to change the layout or operation of any of the lower levels of the development. Key matters for consideration in this application before us tonight are potential noise and amenity impacts, as well as heritage. As I mentioned before, there have been 36 objections received in relation to this proposal, and many of them do refer to noise and amenity impacts. So I'm going to deal with that first. It's important to begin by saying that the application before us tonight is an amendment to what is already an approved use on this site as a function centre. And this council can only consider the proposed changes before us. That is, we cannot reconsider the already authorised land use. The amendments to the proposed Level 8 function centre, in my view, represent a clear improvement to noise and amenity outcomes. In particular, there has been a reduction in permitted hours for the rooftop terrace that is reduced from operating until midnight to operating until 11 p.m. There's also been updated acoustic modelling incorporated that does demonstrate compliance with the latest EPA noise protocol. There's also been the introduction of clearer and more enforceable conditions to protect amenity and noise impacts. The maximum patron capacity remains unchanged. It is a maximum capacity of 200 people. So it's also important to note that this proposal doesn't seek to increase that. Dealing with the other matter that should be considered by councillors tonight, heritage. Although Heritage Victoria was a referral authority, they did not object to this amended permit, and in my view, the revised exterior design is more sympathetic to the original permit when it comes to the heritage context. Management considers on balance that the amended use and development represents an improved outcome against the Melbourne planning scheme. And the recommended pathway from management is one that I certainly support. That is, a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit subject to the conditions in the planning report, with a particular emphasis on clear operating rules and enforceable noise and amenity protections. I am sure the applicant has heard from the questions tonight and my comments the importance of this to council, but I would really like to thank the team for their work, and in particular the drafting of those conditions to ensure that improved noise and amenity outcome can be achieved. In those circumstances, I'm very happy to move this motion, and with that, over to you, Councillor Laylow. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No. In that case, I'll put it to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? In favour, we've got Councillor Louis, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Dr Ball, Councillor Laylow, Councillor Campbell, Lord Mayor Rees, Councillor Guest, Councillor Liu, Councillor Scott, and Councillor Griffiths. All those against? All those abstaining? Councillor Camillo, I take that as an abstention. The motion has passed. I now call on the Lord Mayor to resume the role of Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. We move on to agenda item. Oops, Pardon me while I get to my papers in order here. Agenda item 6.3, Hawke Street Greening Project. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this? I think that would be helpful. So I'm going to invite Jason Segar, Director of City Projects, to present to us on this item. And David Callow, who I saw here earlier, obviously you're welcome to join in the presentation if you would so wish, given your Director of Parks and City Greening role. Over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and members of the public. My name is Jason Segar. I'm the Director of City Projects with the City of Melbourne, and I'm here to present on the Hawke Street Greening Project this evening. I'll take you through the... next slide, please. So I'll take you through the project purpose, recapping on the project objectives, community consultation summary that was undertaken recently, the design as it currently stands, as well as timelines and next steps. On the project purpose, the Hawke Street Greening project is a key initiative out of our Transport and Amenity Program, our TAP umbrella. That is a co-funded matched agreement between the City of Melbourne and the Department of Transport. So 50-50, and that's been set up to specifically address transport and amenity impacts following the Westgate Tunnel. The program seeks to calm traffic in areas, improve cyclists and pedestrians' connectivity, as well as increase green space along the corridor. Now, this project aligns with Council's policies around West Melbourne Structure Plan, Urban Forest Strategy, as well as the Transport Strategy 2030. Next slide, please. Before we get into what is being proposed, it's worth quickly recapping what is set out there currently. This is Hawke Street as it currently operates in a 4-lane configuration with 2 lanes of traffic in either direction. There is a central median that includes some greening, but also predominantly central on-street parking. There are no protected bike lanes. It's a fairly wide road for a local road, and that is running through a residential area, and the project seeks to directly respond to some of the concerns there. In terms of traffic calming specifically, one of the key drivers of the project is that the proposed design seeks to reduce the carriageway from 2 lanes in each direction down to 1 lane, and we'll go into the design in a moment. The reduction in road space is what is anticipated to slow the traffic movement. Speed is a genuine concern along Hawke Street here. Next slide, please. Now, to quickly recap on the recent community engagement, we went through to the community with 2 design options from December last year to February this year. We had a fairly extensive engagement period. Excuse me. Fairly extensive engagement period to account for the Christmas and New Year's period. Option 1 was an adjusted version of the original concept that was endorsed by Council in 2023. This original design needed to account for, it needed to be revised due to a high pressure gas main that was discovered during the detailed design phase. And in discovery of that gas main, it meant that an exclusion zone had to be created along one side of the street, which meant that we couldn't deliver on the original proposal as laid out. And so we went back to the community with a redesign of that, which was designed to constraints but had to remove the majority of the trees that were proposed in that design. An alternative proposal was put forward in option 2, and this was a redesigned concept around a central median to maximise greening opportunities. Both outcomes incorporated an expansion to Hawke and Curzon Street Reserve.
I'm going to say, Jason, if you need to take a moment to clear that croaky throat, please feel free to. We want you at your best.
Thank you.
When you're presenting here.
Thank you, Lord
at
Mayor.
FMC. So no stress, mate. Take your time.
Council put forward both options through to engagement, and we received 273 responses, and of those responses, option 2 was the preference. Some of the features that people valued in the design were around traffic calming and the expanded greening, and option 2 specifically was around the tree canopy cover that was being offered in that design. And you can see in the graph we've broken down the respondents as between residents, users of the street, as well as workers. Next slide, please. Beyond the survey, a few themes came through consistently that are worth noting. Roden Street was raised as an example to keep in mind when finalising the design, as well as safety and around car, pedestrian and cyclist movements was raised as a concern as well, which the design seeks to address. We also received written submission, including community-developed redesign that gathered support via a petition. Key issues raised across those included concerns around traffic calming effectiveness, headlights impact into residential properties, pedestrian safety, as well as greening outcomes. We had 3 in-person sessions with the community to discuss the designs, as well as a information session with the resident petitioners as well. Next slide, please. Now, there's a genuine desire amongst the residents to see Hawke Street improved and advance the project. So this is the design that was has been further refined, which is option 2. And this was designed, excuse me. This was...
Just to be clear for people, this is refined option 2 we're now talking about.
Correct.
Not to be confused with option 2, which wasn't refined.
Yep.
Okay.
That is correct. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, that being said, the design has been incorporating additional feedback from the residents and the community feedback. We've taken into consideration the orientation of tree planting in certain regions, which I'll go into in further detail. But the key feature here is around the reduction of the traffic lane from 2 lanes in either direction down to 1 lane, and effectively slowing the traffic, as I mentioned. On the greening quantum, it's worth pausing here and mentioning the numbers here. The central median will comprise of nearly 2,200 square metres of greening, and the reserve expansion is adding about the same amount, which adds up to a total net of 4,400 square metres of total greening. Next slide, please. This section is where a number of the key design moves come together. You can see that Hawke Street, Curzon Street Expansion Reserve here is to be realised. There are fully protected bike lanes shown in this section, as well as additional greening. The additional greening was added after further community consultation was had, and you can see that text in blue. On parking, we recognise the importance of on-street parking for residents, and we've worked to strike the balance here. We'll continue to work with the residents on the planting and orientation of the specific green space in the bottom of the page. The reserve expansion is also where we can achieve maximum greening outcome. The trees here are largely unencumbered by underground services and overhead services, which enables a significant opportunity for trees to grow in this area, in this expanded reserve. As I said, this brings the total of the reserve to about 2,200 square metres of green open space here. Next slide. This is the section between Adderley Street and Spencer Street. This shows protected bike lanes continuing through here. The central median is a significant design feature in this section as well, adding that additional street greening and achieving council's canopy targets of 40+% in the street. Next slide, please. This is the Railway Place section to Adderley Street. It's the end of the corridor, and the same design language continues here with the central median. Next slide, please. These renders, so this is an existing image on the left-hand side, and also showing a proposed render of what the street will look like on the right-hand side. This is what we are wanting to change in the street in to take it from a car-centric, wide sort of residential street to a street that really supports multi-mode modes of transport, so cyclist and pedestrian usage as well as vehicles. Next slide, please. And here are some renders in street level showing existing orientation as well as what we anticipate will be the outcome proposed in the design at street level and how it will be realised. Next slide, please. I'll just take a moment here. There was a request through the consultation for information on wider network impacts. So I'll just cover that. And Hawke Street's shown there in green. The white labels are local roads and the pink labels are arterial roads. For most part, traffic volumes are already on Hawke Street are suitable for the one lane in each direction arrangement. And what this means in practice is that most drivers who continue to use Hawke Street will likely to continue to do so. The reduction in lanes does not mean a wholesale displacement of traffic in the area. We've carried out traffic counts recently in March 2026, and this did not indicate any time where we would exceed that capacity of one lane in either direction. However, that being said, in very limited periods of high traffic demand, the modelling does indicate that there could be a slight shift to the arterial section of Victoria Street between Dryburgh Street and Curzon Street, and then into Abbotsford Street should that be required. That, again, just mentioning that the traffic counts recently conducted did not indicate that that would, any peak period of time where that would actually occur, but that is an option for motorists should they desire. And the local streets labelled in white are not expected to overall be materially affected by this change in Hawke Street that is proposed. Next slide.
Sorry, Jason, what about Miller Street? Right in the middle there, running in line with Dynon Road. Just remind us, I think there's limited access onto Miller Street, but just keen for your reflections.
And again, there's no material impact that's expected in the modelling that's indicated to impact Miller Street. Again, it's probably more the arterial sections that have been modelled out.
If we're jumping in, can I just...
You can ask a question at any time, Councillor.
Thank you, Jason. So when did you do those traffic counts you just mentioned?
March 2026. So a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And that is in addition to the previous modelling that was done.
Okay.
Modelling and counts, yeah.
If we do any questions.
Yes, please go for it,
Thank you.
Councillor Owen Guest.
Jason, I see here in the report an additional petition from a group of residents, etc., etc. How many people or how many residents were there signing that petition is what I'd like to know, please.
Yep. It was in excess of around about 50, and they were predominantly made up of the terrace houses, which we engaged back with those petitioners in an information session. I think it was about 2 Thursdays ago. Yep.
You got a question relating to this slide, Councillor Camillo? Good, over to you.
Question. Jason, just a question in relation, is anything going to be improved in King Street, the corner of Hawke Street? Because we had a lot of complaints of the resident, they streeting there. It's very dangerous, the crossing. Is anything you can talk about that respect, please?
Yep. I know that section is an area that Council is aware of and is working across with DTP and looking at the overall configuration of the turning lanes as well as So we're looking at options and we're working with DTP on that area. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Keep going, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor and councillors. Next slide, please. I just want to quickly step through, subject to the endorsement today, the project is proposed to move through finalising detailed design documentation. We expect that around about to conclude in August this year. And from there, we'll run a public tender process as well and aim to award tender by the end of this year and construction by early next year. Again, needing to stress that we are committed to refining that design further with residents and the community as we develop the detailed design as well over the coming months. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jason. Any further questions for Jason? No, thank you, Jason, and to David Callow and both teams. I know a lot of work has gone into this. All right. I now move on to our submitters, and I call on Max Fink, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Welcome to Town Hall, Max. Good to see you here.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Just before I start, I sent out what I was going to say, but I'm dyslexic and I couldn't get to 3 minutes, so I've cut pretty much in half what I've sent out to you. So this is a précis, and I hope it'll make sense.
No, that's cool. And please don't feel any pressure. We want to, you put your best foot forward for here at Town Hall.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Max Fink, and I live in a family home. Victoria Street is a very short arterial road, and the section between is about 90% residential. I'm representing fellow Victoria Street residents, and I'm reaching out to you to advocate for a decision that will save our street. We appreciate that the City of Melbourne, in an effort to protect its residents from the Westgate Tunnel traffic, is either diverting traffic or greening streets in West and North Melbourne. We applaud this effort by the City of Melbourne, but need to alert you to an unfortunate outcome that will cause Victoria Street to see its demise. The greening of Hawke Street, based on current plans, will mean that the transformation of Victoria Street into a low-grade amenity arterial road. The reason for that is because 2 traffic lanes in the section north of Spencer Street will disappear. The loss of those 2 lanes means that the intersections at Hawke Street and Spencer Street, as well as at King Street and Hawke Street, will become somewhat choke points that for traffic entering at each junction. To avoid these choke points, we think that motorists will descend on Victoria Street. I'm reaching out to you to advocate a middle ground. The middle ground would be to still allow the greening of Hawke Street to take place with one important tweak. The tweak is that the small section that already has a park and is a mix of commercial and residential, the section between Spencer to King Streets, continues to have 2 lanes in each direction. Hawke Street has already been gifted a park. Victoria Street is being gifted an onslaught of traffic. We remind you that Victoria Street is also part of the City of Melbourne. Although you don't control it, you do control other streets and can help us by allowing them to share some of the load that we're going to inherit. We ask you that you don't leave us out in the cold or throw us under the bus. We ask that you tweak the greening of Hawke Street. Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors, I thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Max, for that submission. Are there any questions for Max regarding his submission? I would simply say to you, Max, that we're actually receiving a petition later on in this evening's meeting regarding vehicle flows and particularly trucks through your part of the city. So I'd encourage you to stick around for that agenda item as well. Rick, did you want to respond to anything that we've heard from Max as well? Rick is our acting head of infrastructure. It's not acting, he is the head of infrastructure here at the City of Melbourne.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through you. Thanks very much for the submission, Max, and I know you've been in contact with many of the officers and also with Department of Transport and Planning, working through some of your concerns. One thing I should probably clarify is in moving or converting Hawke Street to a single lane in either direction, the single lanes will actually be able to manage the volumes of traffic that are currently using Hawke Street. Even though there are two lanes there, the volumes are actually quite low. So they'll be able to be managed and catered for in a single lane configuration. So I thought I'd just mention that because
May I respond to that, please?
You can, yes.
Yep.
You're not really, yeah, please.
I understand that you've been doing figures and numbers, and I was just told that in March something was done. I also understand that the Westgate Tunnel isn't all that attractive at the moment, and it's not being used. If that changes, if the government reduces it from $12 to $6 or something, and suddenly it becomes popular, the figures that you've calculated will be out of whack. At the moment, okay, I accept what you say, but if that changes, we're doomed.
Yeah. All right. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Thanks, Max, and through you, Lord Mayor. The modelling is still ongoing, and Department of Transport and Planning have actually allowed for this period of monitoring to allow traffic patterns to settle, and I understand your comments around the usage of Westgate. The modelling is continuing, and the intention is for the Department of Transport and Planning to understand the traffic movements and make modifications accordingly on the back of that modelling. So the modelling is ongoing, and the information that we have to date is that the traffic volumes within that street network have not dramatically increased.
All right. Thanks for taking the time to present to us tonight, and thanks for your submission as well. I'm now going to call on Aaron Moon, Councillor Camilla.
Sorry, Max. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have been visiting there Victoria Street with some of the residents, and we understand that 60 kilometres an hour, that Archer Road, we don't have control of that, but for the City of Melbourne, Rick has already started his advocacy in the matter because they have the acceleration in that part of Victoria Street, and maybe you can reduce that, would address some of the issues. And on my behalf, I agree with that. I'm just telling that.
Is that a question, Councillor
And
Camillo,
the question
to
of you, do you think the reduce the speed limit could help to fix some of your issues? And what do you think would be appropriate? 40, 50, just...
I think it would help because if Hawke Street is slowing down, that's going to frustrate drivers and they'll come to us. But if we're equally slow, it's not going to be much of an advantage to come to us. And I think 40 would be great. I've heard that it's going to go down to 50.
Yep.
A more realistic figure that would be safer for us and help our situation would be 40, which is a reasonable...
Okay. Thank you, Max.
Figure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Thank you, Max. And just a reminder, this is not a time to debate the motion that's before us this evening. It's a time for questions. On that note, over to you, Councillor
Thank you, Lord.
Guest.
Max, I was just wondering, are your concerns reflected in the petition that I've read about here that was sent in? I'm just curious 50 people possibly having problems. I wanted to know, are you part of the petition?
I may be.
Okay.
I have signed a petition, and that may be.
No,
fine.
that's fine. I'm just trying to get a feel for
sure.
this. And were some of your concerns alleviated by what occurred, I think, 2 weeks ago, when the information apparently was shared, according to Jason? I'm just trying to get a feel. You're a resident in this street.
In Victoria Street, I'm a resident, not in Hawke Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I can help with this. The petition goes to another aspect of the project design related to the street design and where the lanes and the greenery is located, which is a different issue to the one that you've identified for us tonight. Max, you may well have signed the petition, but it's a different issue that we're discussing.
Thank you, Max. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Can I go? I'm starting to like it here, actually.
Thanks, Max. Again, thanks for making your voice heard. All right, and now call on Aaron Moon to please address us on this matter.
Can I ask council business to put the map back up while we're in discussion? That would be helpful. Thank you.
Go for it.
So good evening, councillors. I'm a rate-paying resident of West Melbourne. That's quite new, and I want to speak on this issue. So the report states that there's strong support for this option 2, or revised option 2, because 49% of respondents preferred it. I don't believe that demonstrates strong support, honestly. In reality, I think that shows a community divided on the project that directly shapes the future of one of the most open space starved neighbourhoods in the city of Melbourne. As someone who lives here, I want to see this council be far more ambitious on this project. Retaining such high amounts of car parking while failing to deliver a substantial accessible green space is not an excellent outcome for West Melbourne residents. We know our neighbourhood has very limited public open space, and opportunities like this don't come around often. So we shouldn't be settling for the minimum standard or the smallest change possible. When I attended the public consultation in person, I didn't feel genuinely listened to as compared to other consultations. I explained to officers that I want to see the project reimagined closer to the original 2021 plan, which was the linear park concept, which was bold, transformative, and exciting. Instead, I felt pushed towards choosing between 2 watered-down options. The response I received was essentially, but of these 2 options, which one would you prefer? Many residents, including myself, were asking different questions entirely, such as, why was the original ambition disappeared? Yes, option 2 is preferred by me, but also it has some positive and negative elements. More trees are good, bike lanes and reduced car capacity is better, but compared to the original proposal, this is significantly scaled back. At consultation sessions, the project was described as a place where people could gather in the middle of the street, space for picnics similar to Errol Street. Yet the council has already made and acknowledged that Errol Street layout is not ideal, and we've planned changes for that. So why are we repeating a model that we already know has shortcomings such as Errol Street? This project began as the Hawke Street Linear Park. What is before us tonight is largely a median strip planting project with road narrowing, with the greening broken up by roads. This is not the transformative public space West Melbourne deserves. So I urge councillors to reconsider the level of ambition here, deliver a project that's worthy of a growing inner city community that desperately needs meaningful green and open space.
All right, thanks for that submission, Aaron. Jason, I might invite you to just, because it didn't come up in your presentation, just remind everyone present of the history of this project and some of the constraints that we face in upgrading the street.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, through you. I probably want to be a bit blunt here and acknowledge that the original design is what we would love to deliver, but it is significantly encumbered by underground services and overhead services. The original design, as I understand, which was developed through some engagement previously and was adopted through 2023, had trees planted along one side of the street. And the reality is, through discovery of the underground gas main, it's a significant gas main that results in a 6-metre exclusion zone. We're unable to plant that level of tree planting, and then we would not be able to achieve our canopy cover targets for the City of Melbourne. So while the alternative design of option 2 no longer has that linear park, we've got the expanded reserve, we've got additional tree planting through that median, and having understory planting, it creates that sort of layered greening along the street, comprising a total of an addition of about 1,300 square metres, bringing the total for Hawke Street to about 4,400 square metres of open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And now, Councillor Ball.
And I have a question for Aaron, if you'd like to come back. So, Jason, first, so is it true to say that this is as ambitious as the existing underground services will allow?
Effectively, we've tried to dodge the underground services and place the trees where we can maximise that growth. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Thank you. And Aaron, my question for you was, you mentioned accessibility as a concern. Could you expand on that for our officers perhaps to respond to your concerns?
So it goes to the understory planting. When I was in the community consultation, it was kind of led to me that it was going to be like a picnic area in the middle of Hawke Street. But now I'm hearing it's not, it's actually the understory planting, which kind of news to me actually. But that means that, we're not going to be using that space. It's not going to be an open green space. It'll be something to look at, but not something to, it's not a usable space.
Usability more than accessibility, perhaps, because it's not lawn, it's understory. You're not going to be picnicking on an understory
Not like a
garden
disability,
bed.
accessibility,
I see.
but access to use.
Usability for picnicking. Yeah, okay. Is that a fair assessment? Jason, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Councillor Ball, and thank you, Aaron. As I mentioned, we're continuing to refine the design and very open to further engagement with the community on specific detail, and if that's we need to strike that right balance of understory planning and usability. So happy to continue to engage with community such as yourself on that topic.
Thanks, Jason. Good response. All right, I now call on Carl Hessian, leading resident and citizen of Melbourne. Welcome back to Town Hall, Carl.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to this item. I've come along tonight because I wanted to let you know how keenly I feel the loss of the Hawke Street Linear Park. The park was a project that was shepherded by the community through many stages of consultation that saw it incorporated into the West Melbourne Structure Plan. The West Melbourne Structure Plan itself, after much more effort, was adopted as an amendment to the Melbourne Planning Scheme. Besides the tangible and positive benefits of the park, it had a significant intangible benefit. It stood as an example of how civic-minded people can work within a system to achieve an outcome. I was very happy, I was ecstatic with the final concept design for the park that was adopted in May 2023. It was a compromise. It wasn't my first choice. Like many others in the community, I would have much preferred, for example, if it had been on the other side of Hawke Street, as it is laid out in the West Melbourne Structure Plan. However, that design was the product of many years of consultation, and it was a good design. I don't accept that the belated discovery of a gas main is a sound reason to alter the footprint of the park. I accept that the council can't get a permit from the regulator and the pipeline authority to plant trees in the exclusion zone around the gas main. But I do want to say that the interpretation of the extent of the exclusion zone is something that is highly contested. It is a subjective matter. This can be seen by the fact that there are trees planted in gas pipeline exclusion zones everywhere throughout the City of Melbourne. I also say that just because a permit couldn't be secured in the first instance to plant trees within the original design, there is nothing to say that a permit might not be secured a few years down the track when the heat around the West Gate Tunnel project had died down a bit. I've got that off my chest. Let me turn to this. The problem I have with the recommendation for management is that it substantially deletes contiguous new green open space from the May 2023 final concept plan. More than anything else, I think this is the critical element that is required when one wants to seed a new park in a city. Contiguous green open space, especially that which is adjacent to footpaths, for example, is what sets land up to go down a different development track over time. This is what happened in Roden Street and Bedford Street recently with those parks going into their second phase developments. It's what's happening now with Miles and Dodd Streets and Chapman Street. Hawke Street was going to be different. The Hawke Street Linear Park was ambitious, confident. It was a funded project. It was going to buck the trend of those former parks and was going to roll two phases of development into one that elsewhere would have taken place 30 years apart. I would have much preferred to have seen in this design a securing of as much land as possible, whether trees could be planted on it right now or not, recognising that over the next 10, 20, 30 years, the opportunities would arise for the creation of the Hawke Street Linear Park. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl. And look, just before you resume your seat, I might invite either Rick or Jason to just respond on the point about the gas main and the 6 metre exclusion zone.
Thank you, Carl, for the presentation. I absolutely appreciate your support of the original proposal, and ideally it would have been what Council would have liked to have delivered. Unfortunately, we are required to actually work with the service authorities, and the gas company is a referral authority, and we're required to abide by some of the controls and restrictions around planting with what is quite a high-pressure gas main in this particular instance. Their option one sort of took some of the sort of key elements of the proposal without the significant planting. And so what the community response was that there was a majority preference for the second option, which looked to actually maximise the tree planting in that precinct. So what it also enabled was an expansion of the existing park in that area, adding significant square metres to the park. And as you mentioned, the importance of open space and parkland within that precinct is vital. I might sort of leave it at that and maybe ask if Jason has anything to add that I haven't.
Did you want to add anything, Jason, other than your feeling of deep remorse that we couldn't proceed with the original design?
I might just thank you, Carl, for your submission. I just want to add one minor detail as well. It is a detail that the gas main, which stretches along that entire length of Hawke Street on the northwest side, it varies in depth between about 600 mils to about 1.3 metres deep. And that is, you can sort of imagine 600 mils quite shallow and would be a significant encumbrance in terms of root zone and tree planting opportunities there. So we've had to really consider that physical geometry when selecting areas for planting. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jason. And thank you, Carl, for your submission as well.
Lord Mayor, yep. Can I ask a question to Jason?
Yes, you can.
Yep. Jason, that day that we went there and visited some residents, I remember that you already explained that. Is that information was not provided for Aaron and Carl the day before? Or was the first time that you guys get this information? No.
The information was provided to those who signed the petition, so that was predominantly targeted to those who live in the terrace houses. So I'm not sure as to if they were included as part of that petition, but it went specifically for those petitioners and we had their details. Thank you, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you.
Councillor Ball, did you have a question?
Yes, I think it's important that we ventilate some of these issues that Mr Hessian has raised because they're germane to the whole change of direction. Is it this case that there are gas mains and there are high pressure gas mains and that they have different exclusion zones?
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Essentially, yes, and we are required to comply with their specific requirements, and we've prosecuted that with the Gas Authority, which is APA, and these are the restrictions that we have to work around.
And the fact that there are trees already planted over or near gas mains means, as I understand it, is this correct, that those trees that exist can be replaced, but new trees cannot be planted within the exclusion zone without a new permit?
Essentially, yes. In those other instances, yes.
And we have asked for clear maps of all of the services, understory and overhead, underground and overhead services to be published on our website. Has that occurred? Because I frankly can't find it.
Yes, that has been published on the Participate Melbourne website. I'm happy to circulate that link through to all councillors.
On the Participate Melbourne that deals with Hawke Street greening. And does that map, and sorry I can't find it right now, does that map distinguish between the lower pressure gas mains and the high pressure gas mains?
It shows all services that we're aware of.
And makes the distinction between the two kinds of mains?
I can't speak to specifically if it shows high or low, but...
because that's relevant to the exclusion zone, the width of the exclusion zone and the design of the park.
Sorry, without the plan directly in front of me, I can't speak to if it shows that, but I would imagine that
Rick,
detail
do you
should
know?
be there.
We know that the gas main in question is a high-pressure gas main and runs all the way along Hawke Street and veers off across the park or just adjacent to the park. So we do know that the gas main in place in Hawke Street is a high-pressure gas main.
Okay, and what is the exclusion zone around such a main?
6 metres.
6 metres on either side, or 6 metres in total?
6 metres in total width.
3 metres either side?
That's correct.
I see. And Mr Hessian said that this was subject to interpretation, so I'm not clear if Carl would like to clarify his concerns around that, or if, in fact, what the scope for interpretation might be. I'm not clear.
Let's ask one of our engineers who's here. Would either of you like to speak to that point?
Essentially, we apply to the Gas Authority and we provide our plans. They provide feedback to those plans, and with the service information, they provide the required exclusion zone for that service. It would be difficult to provide plans on the website with all the detail that comes with a submission back from the Gas Authority. We can do that, but they're very technical plans. But certainly the gas main within Hawke Street is a high-pressure gas main that has that exclusion of 6 metres, 3 metres either side, and it restricts the type of planting we do in and around those gas mains. And if we have to do any structural soils or provision for planting trees in those sort of areas, we're unable to. So it's very much constrained by the services in the street.
And is it the case that we have applied to the relevant authority to plant more trees within that zone, or have we not applied? Have we applied and been denied permission to plant new trees, or have we not applied?
Yes, that's the case. We've applied through them, and it's not possible due to that exclusion zone.
Okay. Does it depend on the type of tree?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
It's all planting.
Carl,
treatment.
I wonder, I think you used the term open to interpretation or a matter for something like that. Can I ask what you meant, and if you'd like to say more about that?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak some more about that. There is a huge amount of confusion around when trees may or may not be planted in exclusion zones. I am not an expert in this area, but when you look at the exclusion zone details themselves, as put out by the APA. It's clear that it's not black and white, that it is on a case-by-case basis, and I don't want to be verballing Mr. Kwasik, but the process that he indicated would be the one that I understand to be the case, where they are submitted and they will be assessed as to whether the trees and the nature of the tree and the root structure and so forth, and whether barriers maybe need to be installed. But to sharpen my point, we have at this moment, for example, in the subject area in Hawke Street, a set of trees that were planted within the gas exclusion zone in July last year.
I see.
Now, to further compound this confusion, I don't quite understand how an existing tree plot has somehow attained the status of grandfathering, if I can use that word, so that replacement trees can be planted in it. And yet, if you want to plant the same species of tree on the other side of the gas pipeline, where the street is at the moment, why that would not be permissible. Now, the argument simply seems to come down to because the regulator or the APA won't issue a permit. I get that. So my argument is simply, what's to say that that situation won't change in a few years to come? So the essence of my argument tonight was quite simply putting aside what is planted in the Hawke Street Linear Park for the moment. What I put the most value on is the conversion of the street into green open space, and then we can work through over the coming decades the greening of the street. That essentially is what I was trying to say.
Thank you very much. And is it the case, Rick, that those trees planted in July were replacing existing trees, therefore permitted by the APA without a new permit?
They were planted as part of the annual planting program, and they were replacing or adding trees to an existing road streetscape. What we're doing as part of this project is actually applying landscape to the whole street. There may not have been an application at that time when those trees were planted, but our obligation here is, given that we've provided the plans, the landscape plans for Hawke Street through to the Gas Authority, they've provided their response, and their response is that where there is an exclusion zone above that gas main. The gas main is actually very shallow for the majority of Hawke Street. That adds other complexity to the types of planting and the planting above that type of gas main, and it's also high pressure. So as a responsible authority, we're required to actually follow the constraints and the guidelines provided by the Gas Authority, and because of that, we're unable to proceed with planting on that side.
Thank you. I'm not sure you've answered my question. Are you familiar with the trees that Carl is referring to?
I am, yes.
And were they replacing existing trees for which there were already permits, or were they in new locations?
I don't believe there were permits for those trees. The trees were planted as part of an annual planning program, and I believe replaced failed trees over time. So that it may not have gone through the same scrutiny as what a total landscape does.
Were they within the exclusion zone?
I believe so, yes. That doesn't actually change the requirement for us delivering a full landscape design. The response from the Gas Authority still stands, and we're required to comply with that response.
So just to be crystal clear, the Gas Authority would approve replacement trees being planted within a 6 metre exclusion zone, but would not approve a remodelling of the street which would allow trees to be planted within the 6 metre exclusion zone.
No, that's not the case.
Okay.
I'm not sure what approvals were sought at the time of planting those trees.
Right, okay. But in this...
Through you, Chair, just to clarify this point, like-for-like replacements, our understanding from our Director of Parks and City Greening, David Callow, is like-for-like replacements do not require the approval of the Gas Authority. Okay. As Mr Kwasek said, don't go through the same process or level of scrutiny.
For that. All right, thank you. Thank you to all our submitters this evening. I'm going to now call on a councillor to move a motion. And I believe there is a recommendation from officers. There it is. I'm looking for a councillor who is wishing to move that motion?
There is a slightly
Ah,
amended
yes, there is
version,
two.
please.
Yep. So could we please bring... So there's no mover or seconder for that motion. We're going to move an amended motion.
As we look for that motion, Lord Mayor, can I ask a question, perhaps to officers?
That's it.
During one of the responses, I heard the phrase "the contiguous area of the park." My question is, looking at what I believe to be the original concept design, shows on the Miller Street, Hawke Street corner park there, the footpath deviating towards the road to expand the green open space there. On the current designs, I believe it flows straight with a green space, a small green space called a nature strip to the southeast side of the footpath. Is there a reason that the footpath wouldn't follow the curve of the bike path, allowing for a larger contiguous green open space?
I'm happy to answer that. Thank you, Councillor Rouse, and through you, Lord Mayor. Essentially, the specific orientation of the footpath and layout hasn't been finalised, and we hope to do that through the detailed design phase. We're going to seek to obviously maximise the greening that's possible in that area and still provide appropriate pedestrian access throughout that section there.
Great. All right. Back to the motion that is before us. Councillor Griffiths.
I'm happy to move this, Lord Mayor, but I think we might need a little bit of a grammar change in there without getting too ex-English teacher. For the Hawke Street.
Yeah, that's not what I actually submitted to council business. If you could have another look. And may I ask another question? Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Rees.
While we're doing that,
Yes.
so Liz, Kirsty, can we just check that we've got the right motion there, please? Councillor Ball, back
So
to you.
the highlighted sections should be amended. Jason or Rick, I notice on page 14, it talks about requests for further greening on the southeast side of Hawke Street, and says has been proposed and received significant support from the community in the form of signatures. And this proposal has been taken into serious consideration and will be considered into the next steps of the project. I just wanted to highlight that and confirm what potential you think there is for increasing greening on the south side.
So that speaks to the petition that proposed a redesign of and suggested.
If we're able to do two things at once, if you bring up slide 21, you can actually see the point that's been made here. But keep going, Jason, with your explanation.
Thank you. So there was a proposed redesign and suggested expanding the resident side of the street with some additional greening. There's a couple of things worth noting through there. While there are we're talking about gas mains, there is underground services on that side of the street as well as overhead power lines. So it was considered that any trees planted there would not be able to reach their maximum potential. So we've looked towards some isolated additional greening. If we go to that slide, slide 7. Yeah. In the blue annotations, we've shown some additional greening there as well in those pockets there, and that is being discussed with the petitioners that submitted.
Can you do that?
All right, thank you for that, Jason.
That is correct.
Can I ask a question during they fix that?
Yes, you
just
can,
to Jason.
please.
Jason, just to clarify, in the option 2, some of the residents in the petition, they're asking to keep some of the island, some are part of the islands. And can you affirm to me you try to compromise that in option 2, please?
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Can I just clarify, when you say island, do you mean the central median trees, existing trees? I think, and those are shown, you can sort of faintly see them in the red outlines there. Those trees are not performing as well as they could potentially be. And so it's in this design, it's seen that if we can expand the reserve, we can provide better trees with better growing conditions in that environment. So that was looked at, but with the road orientation and trying to balance that with the cycling infrastructure, this is put forward as the preferred outcome.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can we go back to the motion, please? Let's bring it up. We'll just amend it as required. So
Oh, I see. I beg your pardon. The
word that has been removed, so it's still there but marked through, so it's...
Thank you,
it layered
Council
slightly,
Business.
but the key words are there. All right, back to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think there may be a 2 after the... Sorry, I know I'm being nitpicky here, but just after the blue text for the Hawke Street Greening project as per attachment 2.
For detailed. So those next 4
progress.
words were deleted. For detailed design and documentation. Approve it for detailed... No, don't add that. Just delete 4 words. Leave the word for. Sorry. Delete... Keep the word for. And delete the next 4 words. For detailed design. Beautiful. That's what I had intended. Thank you.
Councillor Griffiths?
I am, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ball, I think you're the seconder.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've obviously had an extensive discussion of this matter through the meeting, which is entirely appropriate, but I still do have a number of comments I'd like to make as we discuss this amended motion, alternate motion, I should say, that's before us tonight. And we've heard a number of discussions. I thank my fellow councillors for their questions and interest that's not just been displayed in tonight's meeting. This has been subject to a very large amount of discussions since it was approved, since the original process was approved as part of the linear park concept. And we've obviously gone through a number of iterations through that journey. And we've heard from the community and we've heard from officers about what I think it's fair to say were our collective desires for how we initially thought this project may be able to proceed. And we've also heard about the constraints that we have faced. And obviously, as a group of councillors now find ourselves in a position where we need to take all of the advice that we have been given and do the very best that we can in the situation that we find ourselves. So having said all of that, I really want to thank, first of all, our officers who have done a power of work, continually refining this project up until this point. As people who are listening in will hear, it has not been a simple process. In fact, it has been a very complex process, and I thank them for the work that's gone into it. And obviously, in turn, thank the many members of the public who've made submissions, and Max making sure to assure you that we've read your full written submission tonight as well. A number of us have had meetings with residents throughout the area. We've seen the petitions and we've heard over a long period of time the passionate conversations that locals have about green and open space in West Melbourne. And of course, there would be passionate discussions because we're talking effectively about people's front yards. It is one of the most sort of precious conversations that people can have. And I really want to thank everyone who has been part of those and who've conducted those conversations in such an open-minded way, given the way that this process has unfolded over time. So I think it's been a testament both to the passion of the community and the good work and ingenuity of our officers that we've arrived where we have now. But also acknowledging, as we've repeatedly heard tonight through Jason and others, that further work will be done and that further conversations can be had as this gets refined even more through the design process. And I think that's a really important note to make, and acknowledging some of those changes in the refined option 2 that we're discussing tonight, particularly struck by some of those changes alongside the bike lanes, and some of the conversations that we've had here over a number of years now as councillors about the best way to roll out bike lanes, the importance of those being high quality, and when we have high quality bike lanes, when we ensure that the environment that they're built in is done well, that we get a much higher level of acceptance from all road users and residents. And I think that what we're looking at here is going to be a really exemplar example, if you can have an exemplar example of what a high quality bike lane looks like. There's a number of changes that have been made in there. The overall big ticket numbers that we're talking about when we say about the expansion of the number of trees, the very real difference that will make, expanding parkland and open space. It's not everything that we would have wanted at the very beginning of the process, but I think given where we find ourselves now and knowing that this is still a journey that we're on, I'm very happy to support this alternate motion.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I really want to thank officers for years of work on this, and to all residents who have engaged faithfully with the process. I think we are seeking to maximise ambition, meet our policy objectives concerning greening, concerning biodiversity, concerning canopy, and maximising amenity as promised to the community through the TAP fund. I hope that this park will be embraced by all local residents, as have other great parks like Roden Street, even though it is not, of course, identical to Roden Street. But I think given officers are seeking to make the best use of the information available to them as it comes to hand, shall we say, and that this design will reduce speeds, which is in accordance with our intended objectives, and it will reduce capacity of the road, but not to choke traffic so much as redesign the street to meet the existing and projected demand for that road, and to make it as green and as amenable as possible to multiple forms of transport. And as for other matters like, do we have lawn areas versus understory areas? Of course, they are competing demands for finite space, meeting different objectives. There's already beautiful lawns already on Hawke Street for things such as picnicking, but I would encourage all locals to continue to engage with council, because this is not a hard line ruled under these designs. Design, as we've heard, will progress throughout this calendar year, and I would encourage locals to continue to engage with us, as of course they do every day, and we welcome that, and will continue in our best efforts to engage with the public in good faith. So I thank everyone involved, and I'm happy to second this design.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. I will also speak in favour of the motion before us this evening, like other councillors, thanking the officers for the years of work that has got us to this point. And I want to thank an engaged citizenry as well for being part of the journey. I think we all collectively feel the deep burn of not being able to progress with the original plans for Hawke Street, and I suspect nobody feels that as much as the engineers and the Parks and Gardens team here at the City of Melbourne, who did so much work on that particular design. So we're all frustrated by what has occurred around us not being able to pursue the original design. However, I think it also needs to be said that what we have come up with now with the refined option 2 is a great outcome. these changes to Hawke Street will make it the envy of streets across the municipality and indeed across Greater Melbourne. We're taking a street which has been a notorious rat run and we're turning it into a beautiful neighbourhood street. We're making it, we are going to build a greener and safer Hawke Street. And we're going to be creating a street that will increase tree planting significantly. Around 240 new trees will be delivered, deep-rooted trees with a big canopy cover, which will deliver much-needed shade and greenery for a part of Melbourne which desperately needs it. We will also have additional expansion of the centre median with garden beds, and I think that's going to be brilliant as well. We're going to expand the Hawke and Curzon Street Reserve, which will create more usable public open space for a growing community. Again, a really usable, valuable green open space in a part of Melbourne that desperately needs it. So I think that's a really second big win in this particular design. So West Melbourne and North Melbourne are a major focus for us in this term of council for our efforts to make our streets greener and safer. And I think Roden Street and Hawke Street will be exemplars of that. Indeed, these will be streets which people from across Melbourne will come to visit to see how it can be done in terms of transforming grey to green and making more livable streets and more livable neighbourhoods. So, not what we'd originally envisaged, but something which I know we will all be proud of. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Guest.
Thank you for everyone who's spoken on this. It's an eye-opening experience and a learning one for someone who hasn't followed this for as long as it's been going. I'm trying to get a gauge, I think, of what the people in Hawke Street actually want, and that's difficult. I think that we can all agree, by the looks of it, that greening and a new park would be highly desirable. And on that, I suspect there'd be fierce agreement. Other elements, though, that we've talked about here, I feel less confident that it's being asked for. I'm not sure how much bicycle lanes are being asked for, reduced speeds, etc. So I realise it's been compromised by gas lines and things have been delayed, but like I say, at this stage, I'm concerned that we might not be actually delivering what the citizens of Hawke Street are asking for. So, at this stage, I'm hesitant to support this at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Would any of the councillors like to speak to this item? No, in that case, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Rouse, Councillor Ball, Deputy Lord Mayor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths, all those, and Councillor Louis, thank you. Are all those against? Councillors abstaining? Okay, Councillor Liu and Councillor Guest and Councillor Camillo. And are you abstaining as well, Councillor Leilou? Okay, so I'm taking that as abstaining as well. That motion has passed. All right, we move on to our next agenda item, item agenda 6.4, $2 pool splash initiative and free swimming evaluation. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? I think that would be worthwhile given how impactful this has been on our community. And so I would invite Joe Hanson, who is our Acting Director of Libraries, Recreation and Waterways, to make a brief presentation. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Hello, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors. I'm really pleased to report the success of this program for this year for the $2 pool splash and the free learn to swim lessons for 2006. Next slide, please. There's some terrific stats and facts there, but a couple of really big ones. 22,245 $2 swims were sold at North Melbourne Pool and Carlton Bars during the months of December to February. And what we know about this program is that 67% of those who talked to us took advantage of the $2 swim offer, which tells us that they were able to use this program as a cost of living relief measure. 46% also attended or told us that they attended to cool off in the heat of summer and of our warmer weather, which also tells us that people were able to use this as a heat relief measure for this program. The free Learn to Swim program, 617 residents and program enrolments for this year, which is really wonderful. And we had some really fantastic results from the participants from this year. 51% of the participants had little or no swimming ability or swimming confidence before they participated in this program. 97% of participants reported to us that they saw an improvement in their swimming ability. So this really shows us that we are directly responding to improving the really critical learn to swim skill for our residents and to improving the water quality or the water confidence of those who participated. So, but the true colour of this program is represented up here, but the magical colour is really represented in some of the direct community impacts that we understood from some of the people that participated in the program. Some really short examples that I have to share with you is the program supported a resident living with a disability, a recent disability. She participated and came to one of the centres with a carer and was able to use some of the accessible pool hoists that are available at the centre to allow her to access the pool safely. We actually had 3 people who participated in the program who live with disability as well. A newly arrived resident told us after participating in the program that before they participated, they're actually unaware of what the red and yellow flags meant on Australian beaches. And we actually, I'm very, very pleased to report something very, very cool for this year, is that we were able to deliver some lessons in Mandarin language. So we're lucky to have a swimming school teacher who was actually teaching Mandarin. But I can speak all day about the impact of this program and the terrific people who participated and the wonderful staff who delivered the $2 swim, the $2 pool splash and the free Learn to Swim program. But I don't think I can do it justice. So if it's okay, I actually have an audio clip to share. It's short, but it's the story of Anna. And we'll get ready to play it in a minute. But she was a participant actually in last year's program. This is her story, and from last year's program and the experience she's going to share with you, she has since enrolled her son and also her father in the program.
The following is a letter delivered to Melbourne City Baths on the 23rd of December 2025.
Dear City of Melbourne, I am the mother of 3 and took part in free swimming lessons at Melbourne City Baths earlier this year. Before the program, I couldn't swim. Every holiday, I sat by the pool while my kids played in the water. During a recent family trip to Phuket, what I learnt became life-saving. My 5-year-old son Micah fell from an obstacle float in the middle of a crowded pool and began to drown. When I saw him, he was already unconscious. I was the closest person to him, even though I was still only a beginner swimmer. Instinct took over. I called for help, jumped in, and swam about 20 metres using the freestyle technique my swim teacher taught me. I reached Micah and pulled him from the water. As I held him, my husband ran over and performed CPR. Moments later, Micah began breathing again. That day showed me just how important it is to know how to swim. Learning through your program didn't just change my life, it saved my son's. Thank you for offering a program that truly makes a life-saving difference to families like mine. Kind regards, Anna.
Thank you very much, Joe. Given you're back in your seat, I assume that concludes your presentation. I just had one question for you, however, and that is we have the 617 participants in our Learn to Swim program. The package that we offer is 5 swimming lessons, is that right?
Correct.
So we're talking about well over 3,000 swimming lessons that were held across the municipality. Wonderful. Thanks, Joe. I just wanted to clarify that point. Oh, we've got more questions as well.
okay.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Joe, for that presentation, for that very, very powerful account about the life-changing impact of swimming lessons. I just had a few questions. So it's very good to hear that we've had a number of people with disabilities who've been able to access the program. I know we now have swim instructors who are trained in conducting classes for people with autism or neurodivergent people. Are those people able to access the free swimming lessons?
Absolutely, yes.
And thank you.
Based on the fact that we now have teachers who are able to teach.
That's fantastic. Thank you. We heard from that very powerful account that you had someone who couldn't swim being able to then, by the end of 5 lessons, swim 20 metres freestyle, which is a pretty amazing outcome. Is that the sort of proficiency that people can expect if they begin as a non-swimmer or with very little swimming lessons? So are people able to achieve that sort of outcome within the 5 lessons?
It depends. It depends on how people engage in the lessons, potentially what experience they may have previously. There are varying levels of swimming programs that are delivered, so it sort of depends upon what type of program or type of experience or skill set you've got coming in. But yes, it's amazing what some lessons can do to confidence.
And then I think in your slide it said about 600 people have taken the swimming lessons and about 60 people have gone on to enrol in further swimming lessons. So if at the end of one tranche of free lessons, if I can call it that, someone was not proficient but they didn't have the means to pay for ongoing swimming lessons, would they be eligible to re-enrol in free swimming lessons in a further rollout?
In the following year?
Yes.
What we have typically done for the last 2 years is look to provide the lessons for those who have not participated previously. However, in this year, what we actually did in the rollout was to provide access for those who haven't participated before. And then if there was any further people who were looking to re-enrol, we were able to provide access to some of those type of enrolments as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Leilou.
The story actually just reminded me of something I was going to do. Having someone who grew up watching Bondi Rescue, the importance of CPR is actually quite important, and it's one that probably we haven't taught enough. Just wondering, given that we do give a lot of free swimming lessons and everything, is there a way which we can offer people if they want to learn CPR? In this instance, where CPR is performed, can we in some ways incentivize either with Lifesaving Australia or whatever to actually go, well, you've learned how to swim, but why don't you also potentially, if you want to, learn how to do CPR? Is that something that's offered or we can look at or, going forward?
So it's not currently offered as a part of a curriculum for a Learn to Swim program, which is typically accredited through VicSwim.
Yep.
Lifesaving Victoria is an organisation that we typically engage with around qualifications around CPR and first aid. So probably the CPR component is typically a qualification.
Sure. So there is no way, because I still remember there's a lot of people who actually go, just basic CPR, just just so that, it's not like certification if you want to do it. But there are times when they do offer, I remember at my high school or something, or secondary school, I think, where they did actually teach us a little bit basic of CPR. Is that something, or do you need a certification to be part of that?
Typically at the moment from an industry perspective, it is a qualification that you would engage in and become qualified in for CPR, and that's delivered by a national registered training organisation.
Yeah. Okay, food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Councillor Leilu. If there are no further... Councillor Guest has got a question.
Joe, sorry, this is just for clarification in the report, but budget question here. I'm just clarify that management's recommendation is for, I think it's $125,000 going forward in the next few years. That's it?
That's correct.
Thank you.
That was easy.
All right, thank you. Now, if there are no further questions, which I don't believe there are any, we will move to a motion, and there it is on the screen, and I'm looking for a councillor to move that motion. Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu, and looking for a councillor to second it. Thank you, Councillor David Griffiths. Back to you, Councillor Gladys Liu.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And isn't it exciting to see all those positive figures and hearing the story from Anna saving her son's life? Come on. This is the best achievements, I think, with the free learn to swim lessons and also the $2 swimming entries. Look, initially we were thinking of having it as a cost saving for families in hot summers, and also help people to learn a skill that many people would take it for granted. Because if you were born in Australia, probably your parents would take you to the swimming pool and give you the opportunity to learn. And that's what I did with my children. But when you think about a lot of migrants, they are not, many of them from some countries, they are not as lucky. So we do know this program, we have a lot of people coming from a migrant background, take advantage of our free Learn to Swim program. So as the portfolio head for Community Health and City Services, I'm so proud to move this motion before us tonight. And the results speak for itself, and it's really exciting and really touching. And I am very proud that the team has done the work, all the teachers, helping people to learn, especially those, the teacher who can speak Mandarin, teaching people who can't really speak good English to have the opportunity to learn as well. And I also understand some people in their senior age, they have never been able to swim, but now they have the opportunity to learn to swim. So it is a powerful message from the council that we are here looking after everyone who wants to learn to swim and take the opportunity to have a splash in our swimming pools. So I'm very proud with all the figures that you have just seen tonight. And when you look at the figure, 97% people reporting positive experience. Well, how often do you get that? 97. This is exciting. So look, I personally want to thank the team led by Joe Hansen, and not only this swimming program, but a lot of fitness and health programs that you led. So well done to you. And I am really excited to encourage more people come to our Learn to Swim program in the future, and also come and take advantage of the summer $2 splash, and especially from our very culturally diverse communities. And for that, I would like to move this motion, and I look forward to seeing it continue in years ahead.
Thank you very much, Councillor Liu. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've got a difficult act to follow there, but I will do my best to match Councillor Liu's enthusiasm for this program. Very justifiable enthusiasm, because as we've seen in those figures, the results have been amazing. And as we heard in the presentation, the effects have been profound, and Joe, your enthusiasm as well in your presentation really comes through, and it's great. It's fantastic to hear when people gather around important pieces of work like this, get involved, and I think it really does speak to what we as a city want to be. I'm particularly struck when I look at this about the impact this can have, for instance, on international students. I know where my son does his swimming at University of Melbourne, they often have international student sessions there. And when we think about what it is that we as a city and a country are offering people to when they come and study here, I'm sure many people have visions of the beach, many people have visions of going to the pool and what an Australian summer is like in their minds when they're choosing Melbourne as a place to come and live and study. And maybe not necessarily thinking about the potential dangers associated with that. And it's so important that we are there to hold their hands through that process and ensure that they're aware of all of the safety facilities that are available, equip them with the skills that they need so that their time in Australia and in Melbourne is as positive as possible. And particularly, I want to echo Councillor Liu's words, thanking the staff who are delivering these programs, recognising that some of the people who are working out in our community centres and our pools amongst the lowest paid of the workers that we have here at the City of Melbourne, and yet here we see a great example of just how important they are as the face of our services, and that what they're delivering is life-changing for people. So thank you to everyone through the organisation, from management right down to our teachers out in the pools who've made this such a fantastic success.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. I also want to speak in favour of this motion. Can I begin by thanking the super energised Councillor Gladys Liu, who, as Mayor, I have the great honour of following her around the sport and rec centres of our municipality and just seeing the energy she brings to her portfolio and her enthusiasm, which is wonderful. And can I also thank the team? I know Anthony Neal's not here tonight, but I'm sure he'll be very pleased and proud to hear the way there's so much support and enthusiasm for this particular initiative, and absolute kudos to him for his efforts here as well. And indeed, look, you know, Australia is an island nation. We love the water. It's part of our way of life. Indeed, freestyle swimming, or the Australian crawl, as it was known, was one of our great gifts to humanity. And there is, I think, an expectation in Australia that people learn to swim, and I think that's reasonable given we are such a water-loving nation. And I think it's only fair and appropriate that here at the City of Melbourne we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that's a possibility for everyone who lives in our community. And obviously, the free swimming lessons and the $2 swims, the $2 splash, is a big part of that. This is a program which changes lives, and as we've learned tonight, this is a program that saves lives as well, and that's amazing. This program has seen over 3,000 swimming lessons run across our municipality, and isn't it brilliant that now in the coming year, if this motion is supported tonight, we'll have thousands more swimming lessons being run this coming summer. And isn't it also wonderful that we'll be continuing the $2 swims, and they'll be running on weekdays over our next coming summer, so that our families can continue to enjoy our pools, particularly in the midst of a cost of living crisis. And so for all of those reasons and the many more we're hearing from councillors, I'm very, very delighted to be able to support this motion this evening. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this motion? No? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. You can see Councillor Liu's hand up on the screen. To declare that carried unanimously. So we move on to our next agenda item, 6.5, proposed councillor participation in Australia-China Innovation Week in June 2026. Would council like a presentation on this item? No. Do any councillors have a conflict in relation to this item?
I would like to declare a material conflict of interest. If council chooses to support the motion, I would receive a material loss or benefit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rouse. We'll give you a moment to leave the chamber. And I would now request that a motion please be put on the screen. That is the motion. I'm happy to move that motion. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I will say that this is a targeted high-value opportunity for Councillor Rouse to position Melbourne as a global innovation city. The invitation comes directly from senior Chinese innovation bodies and reflects the strength of Melbourne's reputation in startups, research and technology, 3 areas which I know Councillor Rouse is very passionate about and has put a lot of effort into as a councillor. Importantly, this visit supports a curated delegation of Melbourne startups to participate, and that creates real pathways for partnership, investment and commercialisation. This is a practical investment in jobs, growth and Melbourne's global standing, and I'm very happy to support the recommendation. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm also very happy to support this recommendation. This council is certainly very fortunate to have someone with Councillor Rouse's experience in innovation being such a champion for it here at the City of Melbourne, and I'm sure he will go on to achieve terrific outcomes for our city as a result of this travel.
Thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion?
Just a question, if I might.
Councillor Guest.
Yeah, will any City of Melbourne staff be accompanying Councillor Rouse on this trip?
Rick, are you able to provide information on that?
Through you, Lord Mayor, there are no additional staff accompanying Councillor Rouse.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this item? No. In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Ball, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Liu, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Louis. All those against? Councillor abstaining, Councillor Guest. That motion is carried. Can we please invite Councillor Rouse to return to the chamber, and we will move on to our next agenda item. Just giving Councillor Rouse a moment to return to his chair. So agenda item 6.6, proposed travel by Lord Mayor, World City Summit Singapore and London Climate Action Week, June 2026. Would any councillors like to declare a conflict in relation to this item? Deputy Lord Mayor.
I'd like to declare a material conflict, Lord Mayor, because I've received a campaign donation from you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Are there any other councillors who... Councillor Scott?
I will declare the same conflict due to an electoral donation from you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any other councillors? Councillor Louis, could you just come off mute, please, and let us know your reason?
Sorry, Lord Mayor. I too need to declare a material conflict due to a campaign donation being on Team Rees.
Donation from me, thank you. And
Here's yourself, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Louis. So you're stepping out, and I, as a potential recipient of the travel, also have a conflict. So I will leave the chamber.
Councillors and for members of the community, not only in person and watching online, recognising that the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor have declared a conflict of interest, we need a chairperson. So we go through the process now of electing a temporary chairperson. I'm in search of a nomination for a temporary chairperson.
I nominate Councillor Rouse.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Leilu, are there any other nominations? Councillor Rouse, to accept the nomination. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried unanimously.
It's fun, though. Why not? I may never get the chance to sit in this seat. Thank you, everyone. Would councillors like a presentation on this agenda item?
I just have a question. If that counts as a presentation?
You can ask a question at any time.
Go for a question.
Sure. Same as the last one. In this particular trip, is it anticipated that any council staff will be attending alongside the Lord Mayor or anyone else who might be going?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Guest, and through you as Chair, Councillor Rouse. This particular travel is by invitation to two global events. The invitation includes the opportunity for +1 support for the Lord Mayor at these events, because there's a number of global cities and global city mayors attending, and what's required to organise bilateral meetings, etc. It's quite standard practice for the Lord Mayor to be accompanied by a Chief of Staff or a staffer from the Lord Mayor's office, and sometimes where appropriate also with a subject matter expert from the administration.
So that'd be a yes, thank you. I guess some costings surrounding that too. Is now the appropriate time, or this time last year we had a trip to China and I asked a series of questions that weren't answered, and so I'm a little disappointed in this report here that we haven't got the information that you've just given, and as including the costs that would surround that. So can you give some costings then to the City of Melbourne of what the true costs are, not just that they're paying for the Lord Mayor, but what's the cost to the City of Melbourne?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Guest. In terms of costs of an additional staff member attending, as I detailed, there is provision of one additional support person. I'd imagine the cost would be of a similar operational cost to the City of Melbourne, of approximately $3,800 to cover both incidentals and accommodation and travel. I can confirm that and give that information back to councillors through briefing. If additional staff members were to attend, I imagine in the order of $5,000 to $10,000 would be a provisional expense for a duration of and type of travel that we're talking about here.
Thanks, Evan.
Any further questions? Councillor Liu.
I noted the meetings in Singapore is from the 14th to the 17th of June, and those in London is from the 22nd to 24th of June. Is the Lord Mayor and the supporting staff going to be away? So it says here will be away from the 13th and the 25th. So does it mean that all the incidental expenses during this time will be incurred and paid for by the council?
Pass that on to Evan Council again, perhaps.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Liu. If I understand correctly, you're asking for clarity around what the C40 and Bloomberg offering is to cover in terms of expenses. So that includes flights for the Lord Mayor, also flights for one additional support. There are some potentially internal transfer flights that aren't covered, and some accommodation in between, and that's included in the total cost there of 3,800.
No, that's not my question. My question is, in Singapore, the conference is from the 14th to the 17th, and in London is from the 22nd to 24th, whereas the proposal is to approve the Lord Mayor's international travel to Singapore and London between the 13th and the 25th. And am I correct to assume that the Lord Mayor and the supporting staff will be away for the whole period from the 13th to the 26th? That's number one. Number two is, if this is the case, does it mean that all the expenses not covered by the hosting cities will be paid for by the council? And number three is, the staff who are going and supporting the Lord Mayor, would all the time there be counted as working days for them?
So, Councillor Liu, correct. All the days inclusive of the travel are working days. So the days that are detailed in the paper are the days of the two events, the World Cities Summit in Singapore. There is a gap in between the World Cities Summit in Singapore and the London Climate Week event. During the days where there are gaps, that's where there's targeted engagements and where some of the targeted international trade and investment activity that's detailed in the report will happen. It's really to make the most of what's being covered by the supporting cities and supporting agencies through C40 in covering the costs while in those locations, rather than travelling back to Melbourne and back again, to make the most of being in those locations.
I'm very glad to hear that. And I just wanted to clarify, because from here, the 4 pages that I have received, I can't really see all the different meetings or engagements the Lord Mayor will be having. All I can see here is the 2 dates for Singapore and London. So would you have the plans for the Lord Mayor to engage in different activities? Is it in progress, or have you got the outline of what is going to happen, and how and what sort of support the supporting staff will be doing for those days?
Thanks, Councillor Liu. We are working on refining the detailed program, and we can circulate that to councillors through briefing paper.
No further questions. Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, very simple, to clarify that. So Bloomberg is paying for 2 people to travel overseas to be represented in 2 different cities in 2 different countries, and that covers airfare and accommodation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is the Lord Mayor would be open for the other councillors suggesting during that time that Councillor Glad's mentioned that maybe he'd be open to investigate issues like we currently investigate in the city of Melbourne, for example, safety issues in London or other issues that could be from different portfolios from different councils. Is that something that's open for councils to be referring?
I can't speak on behalf of the Lord Mayor, but absolutely the program looks to cover off those issues. And if there's any leads from the councillor group of existing connections or established entities that we can speak to maximise the time in those locations, we're tracking those down through our international team at the moment. We look to cover all of the aspirations of the council and aligned with the council plan priorities.
Okay, thank you.
One further question, Gladys.
I've got further question, yes. I do understand that international travels for business, especially for council business, is not just for fun. It is a lot of work. I do appreciate that. I just wanted to know the time between Singapore and London. Is there any time that the Lord Mayor would have for private time? That you allow him to have some time to not to engage in the very, very busy schedule of doing all those sorts of meetings.
As I mentioned, Councillor Liu, and as you're aware, and other councils who've been on international travel, there is very little downtime available. Having travelled with the Lord Mayor to Rio, we were working much longer days than what we work back here at Town Hall. So I would be very confident that we'd be working for most hours of the day in meeting with counterparts and making sure we bring back the highest value back to the city.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Any further questions? Fantastic. Can we get a motion up on the screen? And I believe there is an alternate motion ready to go. We can just give councillors a second to check that's the right one. So just 8.1 to 8.5. I'll call on a councillor to move the motion. Councillor Griffiths, do you have a seconder? Councillor Leilu, I'll pass back to the mover to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. I'm very happy to be moving this motion, and particularly am doing so with my environment lead hat on, and recognising both the work that the Lord Mayor and officers did in Brazil last year, and that really the work that is going to be undertaken in large part on this journey is following on from that and picking up on that leading position that our Lord Mayor has, and that he's recognising the fact that he's recently been appointed as the Vice Chair for the C40 Cities Steering Committee, and that's a very important role and works with some of the main topics that we've been talking about in this chamber recently, building on the work of the Lord Mayor and the work that he did in Rio last year, particularly around sustainable data centres, AI-enabled digital infrastructure, and making sure that Melbourne's role as a global leader in these areas is continued. It's important work, and I'm grateful that the Lord Mayor is willing to take on the travel associated with going to make sure that Melbourne is well represented in these forums.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Over to you, Councillor Liu. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion?
I think I should.
Councillor Guest.
Acting chair. I could leave it and just say I think that overseas travel for these sort of ventures is probably the domain of the federal government, but I won't leave it at that. Whilst I'm not speaking against it per se, I'm not speaking for this motion. And I do go back to things that we spoke of last year and questions I asked. In last year's sort of lead up to our budget, we spoke to things such as going back to basics at a council level. We spoke of reducing debt, and we also spoke extensively of keeping the burden on ratepayers down. There were such things mentioned as a rates freeze, and a lot of these expectations haven't been met. On top of that, I do recall there was a China trip last year where I asked a series of questions in this room, which included the question that I asked earlier, what is the true cost of the trip? And at that stage, we weren't able to answer the question, which was disappointing. I also asked whether anyone had any affiliations with those who were going. I do note that 4 people have felt the need to leave the room. But last year there was clearly, I know the City of Melbourne had invited a donor or donors on the trip. So for issues, I think we've got improvements to make here in transparency. I think we've got improvements in how we communicate with our ratepayers and the burden that we put upon them. So for those reasons, I don't feel able to support this trip and those of councillors wishing to travel. I think we should be looking closer to home and doing the things that we suggested we would do last year. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. That will be Councillor Camillo, Councillor Ball, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Liu, Councillor Griffiths. All those opposed? Councillor Guest, having neither supported or voted against, is taken to have abstained, and I declare the motion carried. Can we please fetch the Lord Mayor and team?
This concludes the reports from management. So we move on to agenda item 7, general business. There is one item of general business, although there might be two. The first of those is 7.1, petition safety and trucks in North and West Melbourne. And I believe there is a motion, procedural motion, where we accept the petition. Am I correct on that score? Yes. There is. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much. Good. So I'm going to move the motion before us. I'm looking for a councillor to second it. Thank you, Councillor Raphael Camillo. And in speaking to this motion, let me begin by thanking Miss Gibb and the more than 350 residents who have signed this petition and taken the time to raise their concerns. Indeed, this motion, when put together with others that we have already received on this topic, now bring the number of petitioners of the City of Melbourne to well over 1,000. And so the message from Town Hall to our inner city communities is that we hear you. This isn't an issue localised to North and West Melbourne. Back in Melbourne, in this chamber, we heard a similar petition from the Kensington residents who were also concerned about increased truck movements and deteriorating safety. And we've also heard from the Carlton Residents Association through their meetings about their concern about increased truck and vehicle volumes through their part of our municipality. And it's the same story in Parkville and elsewhere across the City of Melbourne. I do note that we will... let me start by saying since opening, the Westgate Tunnel has already carried more than 1 million vehicles through the inbound and outbound tunnels, and more than 20% of those trips have been trucks. This chamber has heard a concern from councillors about the impact of these vehicle flows at the eastern end of the tunnel, namely the end of the tunnel, the project which concludes in the municipality of the City of Melbourne. I do remind people that we will be receiving a fulsome report from management in July that will provide advice to council on which roads and other regulations the city might consider in response to these changed traffic conditions. In particular, we are looking at which roads we can work towards banning trucks from, as well as other streets across the city that can have speed limit reductions. So we're talking here about speed limits potentially going from 60 to 50 or even 40. It is notable that when the Westgate Tunnel project was opened, a lot was made about all the roads in the western suburbs of Melbourne which were being made truck-free. And indeed, some of the most notorious truck rat runs in the western suburbs, like Francis Street in Somerville, Buckley and Moore Streets in Footscray, Hudson Road in Spotswood, Blackshaw Road in Altona North, or Williamstown Road, all were made 24-hour truck-free or had very significant new truck limitations put on them. We have seen no such changes on the eastern end of that project in the municipality of the City of Melbourne. And as a result, we are now experiencing a very significant level of community concern, as is evidenced by the petitions that we're receiving from residents in the north and west of Melbourne, Kensington, and we're hearing from elsewhere. And so, if it's good enough for Williamstown Road or Francis Street, maybe we should be looking at roads like Macaulay Road, Victoria Street, and others for opportunities to limit truck movements, to lower traffic speeds, and make our communities safe, and ensure that the City of Melbourne has that high level of amenity that our residents, our businesses and our community rightly expect and deserve. Councillor Camillo.
Very quick. Lord Mayor, thank you. I'm more than happy to receive that. I myself has been meeting with the residents in Kensington and with the Director of Infrastructure, Karen, and I would like to thank her to be listening to that. Some of the process already started. We already has been listening to the residents, and I think it's very plausible to receive this petition. And totally, I would like to support the residents in there and welcome from this petition receiving to the City of Melbourne. And thank you, Sybil Gibbs, for spending the time and the grassroots to be organized this petition with the City of Melbourne. Back to you, Lord Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Camillo. Did any other councillors want to speak to this motion? No. In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. Now, a second item of general business on indulgence, councillors, is us noting the very special contribution of Jack Hanna, who I now can no longer see in the chamber. It seems just seconds ago I saw him here, and now as I look to honour him and his 40 years of contribution to the City of Melbourne, he's not here. So can we please minute that Council unanimously congratulated Jack Hanna on an extraordinary 40 years of service to our city. Melburnians don't come any better than
Lord
Jack
Mayor.
Hanna, and we are truly indebted forever for his incredible service to our city.
I bet he's in earshot. How about we give him a big round of applause?
Well, great suggestion, Councillor. Thank you, Jack Hanna. We love you. And as I was just reminding councillors earlier today, as a councillor, Jack Hanna is your first friend at Town Hall. And for some councillors over the journey, he's their last friend as well. First and last friend here at Town Hall. Thank you, Jack. We do indeed love you. All right, that concludes the items of general business. We move on to agenda item 8, urgent business. Are there any items of proposed urgent business? Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think there should be a procedural motion that can be brought up. And there it is. I will move that, please.
Thank you. That's a procedural motion. Is there a seconder for that procedural motion? All right. Given it is a procedural motion under our rules, we will not be debating it. And so I move the procedural motion.
I think that has to be moved and seconded.
And it has been
We
moved.
need, yes, but
Second,
with a
Councillor-
speech, we need a reason why it meets the criteria.
All right.
Otherwise, it's nonsensical.
Back to you, Councillor Griffiths. Did you want to speak to this procedural motion?
Very briefly, Lord Mayor, and without debating the main topic, the reason why this has arisen since the distribution of the agenda was that there was a public meeting regarding this matter in Kensington on the weekend, and that it cannot be safely or conveniently deferred until the next meeting due to the fact that this is currently causing a large amount of distress in the community, and I think it's important that we have our voices heard in the discussion about this matter.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gladys Lou, did you want to speak to this procedural motion?
No, thank you.
All right. In that case, we will put it to a vote. All those in favour of us considering this as an item of urgent business, please raise your hands. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Guess, Councillor Liu, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Louis. All those against, Councillor Ball. That motion has passed. We move to the substantive item. Can I request that an item of Can I check, Councillor Griffiths, that is the motion you propose to move?
It is, Lord Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. So moved. Is there a seconder for this substantive motion? Councillor Gladys Lou, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to my fellow councillors for allowing this item to be introduced as urgent business. It is a topic that I think most of us around this table are very familiar with, and is one which is, as I said in the previous procedural motion, a topic of a large amount of conversation in Kensington amongst other suburbs across our municipality, and one which our community is feeling keenly at the moment. For those who might be coming up to speed with CoHealth, particularly people who might be watching or listening in, the very brief backstory is that CoHealth is an organisation which originally arose out of a number of suburban community health services, including the Kensington Community Health Service, and is one which is much loved by our community and much relied upon by some of the most vulnerable members of our community. Without going through all of the various amalgamations that led to CoHealth itself being created, CoHealth came about, and in the very shorthand version late last year, announced, as I understand it, without much consultation, that they were going to be shutting services in a number of locations across metropolitan Melbourne, including Kensington, and were going to be selling off some of their assets. And that led to a series of public meetings. I know, Lord Mayor, you and I both attended one in Kensington, I think late last year, where there were probably well over 100 people present. There's been a number of meetings that have continued since then, most notably last week where there was a meeting in Collingwood, Fitzroy, where there were about 200 people, I understand, and another one on Saturday that was well attended by a number of representatives of different levels of government, and also, again, by a large number of locals who were voicing their concerns and telling their stories of how important community health and the CoHealth services are to them, and the fears and worries they have about the uncertainty that currently surrounds what is going to be happening with that service, even though there has been $1.5 million worth of additional funds allocated by the federal government. Last year, Professor Stephen Duckett, who will be well known to people in the health management community, commenced a report. And as I understand it, that report received over 300 submissions, which I think again speaks to the importance of this service to our community. That report has been received by the state government, received by the federal government, and received by CoHealth. And as it was explained to people who attended the meeting on the weekend, while the state government and while the federal government have agreed to the release of that report, it was told at that meeting that CoHealth management has not yet agreed to the release of that report, and that is again causing great unhappiness to residents, both the ones who rely on this service directly, but also the ones who value this service being in their community and supporting their fellow residents. So a relatively simple request at the end of this, Lord Mayor, is that if this motion is passed, that you would write to the Chair of CoHealth seeking the immediate public release of this review and the recommendations associated with it. Again, thank you, councillors, for allowing this matter to be considered. I think it will reassure our community that we have given voice to this important matter tonight, and I hope you'll be able to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Over to you, Councillor Gladys Liu.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And I share Councillor Griffiths' concern, and I thank him for moving this motion tonight. As the portfolio head for community health and city services, I believe it is essential that these vital health services remain accessible to the community and especially the Kensington community. And there is a review, so the review has to be, the result has to be made public and let people know what they have done and what, if there's any recommendations, we need to know. I think it is just right to have the review be open to the public. So I definitely would support this motion before us tonight and requesting the Lord Mayor to write a letter to the Chair of CoHealth seeking the public release of the report findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Ball.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the mover and the seconder for this motion. I'm not convinced that it can't wait another week, but we are all very keen to see this report and most especially its recommendations from Professor Duckett, and even more keen to see CoHealth survive and thrive as the vital public service that it is. It needs viable, reliable funding and, moreover, a viable funding model, because community health is not the same as any regular GP, and regular GPs are under a huge amount of pressure themselves, but this typical client profile, the patient profile that CoHealth caters to, are not 6-minute appointments. They are vulnerable, complex clients with high health needs, often complex multiple health needs. There's a need to build rapport and trust with patients, and where possible to deal with multiple health issues all at once when someone presents. Not say, I'll deal with this now, but go away and come back and I'll deal with your next thing. So we need the federal government to reconsider its funding for community health services such as this. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by discussion on my right. Forgive me. So I'm very happy to support this, and I appreciate Councillor Griffiths bringing it to us this evening, especially as I wasn't able to attend any of the community meetings that have been held. I do understand there is a high community interest in and support for CoHealth, which I think will be echoed here in this chamber. I understand the fourth clause here that says the meeting was told that CoHealth blocked the release of this report. My understanding is that CoHealth is seeking the opportunity to prepare a response to the report, and that it needs perhaps another week to be able to do that, such that its response can be made public at the same time as this independent assessment of its performance. So that seems reasonable to me, and I look forward to seeing both of those documents in due course. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ball. Any other councillors want to speak to this item? I'll just say very briefly that I'd be very happy to sign a letter along the lines suggested. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for your efforts on this and your very long-standing, passionate commitment to community health services in the inner city. And thank you, Councillor Gladys Luke, for also getting behind this campaign as well. And thank you, Councillor Ball, for your ongoing efforts as well. It's hard to overstate the importance of CoHealth and these community health services in our city. Kensington Centre alone supports around 4,000 patients and their single-parent households, refugees and asylum seekers, pensioners, low-income residents, people with chronic or complex health needs. About half live in public housing. So these are communities who desperately need these health services, and we do need to find a way forward to ensure that they can be provided at an excellent level and in a sustainable way going forward. So we can only hope that this letter will bring about the release of this report and see the action that's needed to continue these services going forward. On that note, did you want to write a reply, Councillor Griffiths? No, in that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. All right. Are there any other items of urgent business that any councillors wish to raise? No, in that case, we'll move to agenda item 9, public questions. Another 15-minute period will now be provided for any members of the public who have any questions of us. Would anybody like to avail of themselves of that opportunity? Please make your way to the lectern. And please introduce yourself and fire away.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, all councillors and officers and those of us left standing at the meeting. My name is Ian Young. I'm an owner and a resident. I had absolutely no intention of asking a question at this podium tonight, but obviously I'm interested in item 6.2 earlier on tonight's agenda. The Space Hotel is directly across the road from the 130-year-old Indigo building.
Yes.
At the start of this meeting...
So, Ian, you're actually asking a question, but under our rules, that was an item that was considered this evening. And so you can make a submission about that item, but you can't now ask a question about it.
Okay, let me cut to the chase.
Okay.
At the start of the meeting, you mentioned that you had received 2 submissions to be considered as part of 6.2. One of those was from myself. Correspondence was sent by me yesterday, as per your guidelines, with 4 key questions in relation to the Space Hotel, around heritage, antisocial behaviour and the significant increase in residential density. I understand from the notice for tonight's meeting that public questions received in writing will be read out by the chair of the meeting, and either a response will be provided at the meeting or the questions will be taken on notice and response provided in due course. Obviously now redundant. These questions weren't read out as part of your procedural guidelines prior to the recommendation and approval. It is not clear to me if these questions were even distributed to councillors and taken into consideration at all. My question is simply, why haven't our questions been read out? And why do you ask for submissions from residents with genuine concerns, genuine interest, if they're not to be taken into consideration before you make your decisions?
Thank you, Ian. Stay at the lectern. I might invite the Deputy Lord Mayor who led council on this item this evening to respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Ian, for your submission. Your written submission was distributed to all councillors. They all had the benefit of that before they considered the item tonight. Because it was a submission, it is not a matter where answers are provided. So in public question time at the start of the meeting and at the end, answers are provided. Your public question time excludes matters that are for consideration as agenda items during the meeting. You made a submission that contained questions, but those questions, because they were an agenda item in the meeting, would not be treated as questions to be addressed in public question time. But I really want to, first of all, thank you for taking the time to make that submission and assure you that all councillors here had the benefit of your written submission before making their decision tonight.
Am I able to respond or not?
I was going to do one other thing, which is maybe to ask our officers if they would be content to provide a written reply to you or respond in some other way so that you do have the benefit of the answers to those questions, and not because of our procedural rules are you denied an answer that I think you are still keen to receive. Is that possible, Evan Council? Thank you.
Great. So we've got confirmation you will get a written response to those questions. And if you want to hang around at the end of the meeting, we can have further discussion about that. All right, thanks, Ian. Are there any other public questions? No. In that case, we'll move on to agenda item 10, closure of the open meeting. I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare this FMC meeting finished at 8:34 p.m. Thank you, one and all.